Chapter 3004. The Inner Demon 3. I have prepared it. Gu Shijio took out a set of bridal clothing from her body, as if performing a magic trick. I have wanted to wear this set for a long time. Di Fuya's sight fell on the wedding dress. He did not know why, but in his heart, he felt that the dress looked very familiar. The wedding dress was woven with mermaid silk, and covered with bright blue gems on it that looked like stars. It actually formed a starry sky pattern on it. The attire looked luxurious, exquisite, and majestic. It was so beautiful that it was sure to capture anyone's attention and keep their eyes on the dress. Di Fui held his breath. He did not know why, but seeing this suit made him feel as though a fine needle was suddenly stuck into his heart. It was sore and swollen for a moment. He could not help but raise his hand to touch the dress. The mermaid silk definitely made its texture very smooth. It was like holding the gentle moonlight in his hand. Can I wear it and show you? Gu Shijio looked at him eagerly. Her bright eyes seemed to be filled with countless stars, captivating anyone to look a little deeper. Okay. Di Fui nodded as if he was hypnotized. She is a fake. Gu Shijio squatted in the yellow sand. Her face was pale as she watched the illusion in the sky with her fists tightly clenched. She felt that she must have been having a nightmare. Unfortunately, there seemed to be no way to wake herself up. After she got out of the vortex that carried her away, she found that she did not actually leave the desert, but fell into an ice field with a lot of whirlpools. The ice field was deadly cold to the point where she had to run her spiritual power down to expel the chillness. She looked around but could not see her son or Fan Qianshi. Instead, she found an igloo. There was a woman in white sitting inside the igloo. Gu Shijio recognized this woman as the moody demon in the desert, but an auspicious light now surrounded her, and there was no trace of the demon spirit from before. The woman seemed to be waiting for someone in this igloo as she would always look out from time to time. Gu Shijio soon found a problem. Even though the woman kept looking out the igloo, she did not seem to notice Gu Shijio at all. She watched the woman's eyes from a distance, and could feel a sense of sorrow within her. Gu Shijio took 2 steps forward, and almost stood right in front of her. Yet the woman still did not seem to see her. She just sighed as she said, "It seems that he is not coming." Her voice was soft and seemed to carry a sense of disappointment. Then, she took a piece of paper out of nowhere, and started to write on it. Gu Shijio continued to watch her, and was rather stunned by everything. Everything seemed so familiar to her, as if it had once happened in her own life. She watched the woman write a few lines of words, and then irritably scrunched the paper into a ball, and threw it around the igloo. The woman would look outside at the snow and sigh. In fact, this is also good. I came here barefoot and will leave barefoot. I have nothing to worry about. However, I do feel sad. Why am I sad? I really want to see him again, even if it is just for a drink. The woman looked very lost and very bleak at that point. Just watching everything unravel from the side already made Gu Shijio feel a pain in her chest. Intuitively, she wanted to hug the woman. However, as soon as she took a step closer, her vision appeared like the swirling of a kaleidoscope. It seems that she stepped into the whirlpool again. Once the colorful scene receded, she found herself falling into an antique restaurant. The place was filled with people who were dressed rather quaintly, unlike any ethnic group she had recognized before. Published at 24th of May, 2020, 9:07 a.m. Chapter 3005. 3005 There, she saw the woman in white again. The woman sat in the corner of the restaurant, and ordered a table full of dishes. She had a few drinks over dinner too. Sponsored content. Remove ads? Gu Shijio looked at the dishes that the woman had chosen, and although there were many dishes she did not recognize, she inexplicably felt that she would enjoy them very much. Aside from that, she was also puzzled why the woman had ordered so much food. The amount of food she had on her table was probably enough to feed 10 people. She not only ate a large table of dishes, but also drank more than 10 jars of wines. Even watching her from the side was enough to make Gu Shijio feel full. Another oddity that struck Gu Shijio was that the woman in white was in her appearance at the restaurant. A peerless beauty was eating and drinking in a commoner's restaurant, so naturally, it attracted a lot of attention. There were even a few lechers eagerly waiting for the woman to get drunk. Gu Shijio frowned at the sight of the men. She understood that everything she was seeing was an illusion, but she was not sure if it had actually happened, or if it was something that the god of demons wanted her to see. Generally, Gu Shijio was not a person who could be easily moved by her emotions, but she felt that she could quickly feel the mood of the woman in white at the moment. Sponsored content. Remove ads? The woman's heart was empty, and she wanted to fill it up with something. She seemed to be afraid of being alone, too, as seen by her choice to dine in a crowded place instead of a private room. Once the woman in white was full, she got up and left. It was then that a few lechers dragged her into an alley. The lechers wanted to take advantage of her. They said a lot of spiteful words to tease her. She was obviously drunk, so when they teased her, she did not seem to catch what they were saying, and also responded very slowly. One of them even placed their hand on her shoulder and said frivolously, "Little girl, does nobody want you? You look like you have been abandoned. Why don't you marry me and be my concubine?" This action had crossed a line because the woman in white began to look annoyed. Sponsored content. Remove ads? In a matter of seconds, the 4 lechers were punished for their actions. The woman had beaten them up and even disfigured their bodies. Before they knew it, the 4 of them were already dead. At this point, the woman's dark eyes had turned faintly red. She stood by the wall and ignored the 4 dead people lying on the ground in the alley. All of a sudden, she seemed to raise her hand to her chest as if abruptly realizing something. "It is strange. I have obviously eaten so much. How am I still hungry?" She then stumbled away, but certainly left Gu Shijio stunned. She could see that the woman in white was a god, but she already had the heart of a demon. The demon inside her had made her kill the 4 men, but since she was drunk, she did not even realize it. It was very dangerous for a god to have an inner demon. If the demon were to gain control over her body, the consequences would be terrifying. Gu Shijio slightly bit her lip as she understood that this was her past life. Sponsored content. Remove ads? Regardless of whether the god of demons deliberately wanted to show her these scenes, or if she saw it by mistake, there could be something she could learn from the visuals. As often said, knowing yourself and knowing the enemy was the key to winning a battle. Once she knew the origin of the other party, she could think of a way to deal with her. Therefore, Gu Shijio took a step in the direction of the woman, and after another whirl, she found herself falling back into the desert. She was stunned for a moment as she did not know if she had awakened from her illusion, or if she was still stuck inside. She looked around and quickly found that the desert was not the desert that the god of the demons had made. The desert seemed very ordinary, but the sun in the sky was poisonous. Nevertheless, it was still within the limits of human beings, so they would not die. She still did not see Di Hao or Fan Qianshi anywhere. The same could be said for Little Pink and Little Black. She only saw a vast land filled with yellow sand. While she was trying to find her bearings, she suddenly saw purple clouds in the sky and multiple lightning strikes that flashed through the clouds. She immediately felt uneasy as she recognized that it was the catastrophic thunderbolts from the gods. As she looked up, she saw the woman in white in the clouds along with a man standing in front of her. In an instant, Gu Shijio felt as if someone had slammed her head really hard. It was Di Fui. He was experiencing a catastrophe with the woman in white. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Note: please download the sponsors game to support us. Chapter 3006. Removing the inner demon. He was wearing a dark purple robe that looked ancient, and had cast an anti-thunderbolt spell that emerged from his hands. The spell was foreign to Gu Shijio, and so was the catastrophe. Gu Shijio had never seen such a violent catastrophe before. It seemed to have the power to destroy the earth. The 2 of them would likely be turned into debris. From her observation, Di Fui's skill was insufficient to resist the catastrophe thunderbolts above their heads. If the woman had not cast a spell, an additional spell on him, he would only have been able to endure 3 thunderbolts at most. While they were experiencing the catastrophe, it seemed that Di Fui had passed out and had his eyes closed. As a result, he did not see the woman cast a spell on him to keep him safe. He also did not see the woman clearly struggling to keep them alive. Her face went ashen very quickly, and her white dress was stained with blood. 9 thunderbolts struck each of them, and Gu Shizhou saw that the woman in white had cast a spell to clean the mess on her body the moment they had passed the catastrophe. Therefore, when Di Fui opened his eyes, he had only realized that her face had turned pale. Everything else looked normal. Knowing Di Fui, he would obviously check on her. "Are you okay?" "I am okay. You can go now." The woman in white waved her hand to dismiss him. Di Fui went one step closer to her and said, "Let me check your pulse." The woman in white shook her hand and rushed him away. Her voice was cold and cruel. "You and I have nothing to do with one another anymore. You don't need to see me again." Then, the woman in white teleported and disappeared. Gu Shizhou was not able to catch a glimpse of Di Fui's reaction, as the scene in front of her changed abruptly. She seemed to be in the depths of the Gobi Desert. There were numerous large boulders in the area, but they all seemed to carry a dark aura around them. The woman in white was breathlessly leaning on a large stone. Her forehead was filled with sweat, but there was frost on her eyelashes. Meanwhile, blood flowed down her lips, and even after she wiped most of it away, the stream of blood did not seem to stop, so she simply gave up on cleaning it. It looked as though she was trying to manage her breathing. From time to time, she used her fingers to cast some spells on her own body. However, the auspicious light around her seemed to be fading. It looked weak, as if it was going to dissipate soon. She looked up at the sun in the sky and hugged her arms as she said, "It's so cold. Why does it feel like winter? Even with the sun hanging in the sky. It is so weak." Gu Shizhou stood next to her and shook her head. She could feel that the temperature in the desert was actually quite hot. It was about 33 to 34 degrees Celsius. Although it was not very hot, it was certainly not cold. It was at this moment that Gu Shizhou was more certain that this woman should be her past self. It turned out that she had such deep entanglements with Di Fui, even in her previous life. Her gaze suddenly fell on the shadow of the woman in white that lingered on the ground. There were actually 2 shadows on the ground. One was normal, but the other one was like a snake, circling her. As it hovered, the woman seemed to have black smoke circling her too. Was this the inner demon of the woman? Gu Shizhou looked at the hovering shadow carefully and was shocked. Due to her extensive knowledge, she knew for a fact that everyone had an inner demon, even a Buddha. However, it was usually suppressed and purified, and it would not appear at all. It was only when there was extreme regret, hatred, or dissatisfaction in a human's heart that the spirit of their body would be extremely weak. At that time, the inner demon would appear and take control of their body. The inner demon would always confuse their victim as it took control over their body. At this moment, the woman's inner demon was obviously tempting her. Chapter 3007. Removing the inner demon too. At this moment, the woman's inner demon was obviously tempting her in her mind, and her black eyes would suddenly flash red from time to time. The woman in white kept casting spells on herself, presumably trying to suppress the inner demon. Nonetheless, she could not succeed. The twisted shadow on the ground was getting more and more powerful by the second. It climbed from her feet to her waist. Gu Shizhou understood that once the shadow reached her face, it would have complete control over this body. From then on, it would belong to the demon. All of a sudden, she heard a conversation in her ear. "You like him? Why don't you tell him? Why did you let him dismiss the discipleship and undergo the catastrophe?" "No, I can't like him. I am going to die soon anyway. Those thunderbolts just brought the date forward by 1 to 2 years at most. It's useless to tell him how I feel. I don't want him to suffer once I am gone. You are so good to him, but he is so cold to you. You only delayed the wedding for 1 hour to rescue your apprentice, but he did not even forgive you. He refused to see you for a few years, and when he did, he forced you to dismiss his relationship with you. Apparently, he did not want to be your apprentice for another second. In the end, he was too lazy to take care of you. He did not even want to have a farewell drink with you. He did not care about you at all. I don't want him to care about me. It's good that he didn't fall for me. That way, I don't have to feel sad even when I die. I am actually pleased that things turned out this way. You are lying to yourself. You are very sad. Your heart is hurting. It hurts like a fire is burning you up from the inside. No, the catastrophic thunderbolts injured me. Ah, you don't even dare to speak your thoughts. Are you still the god of creation? This conversation had a significant impact on Gu Shijio. She was stunned just hearing everything that was said. God of creation. Was she the god of creation in her previous life? And was Di Fui her apprentice? Whose wedding was delayed? Had she almost married Di Fui? Who was her apprentice in her previous life? Who did she try to save that ended up delaying the wedding for an hour and caused Di Fui to end things with her? Why did they break up so easily? Too many things were going on at once to the point where she could not collect her thoughts. Just as she was trying to gather more clues from the conversation, she saw the black shadow circled around the chest of the woman in white. Let me do it. Let me control this body. I will find him and tell him your true thoughts. You like him so much. Both of you could have been a pair, right? The voice of the demon was full of temptations, as it inched up little by little. The woman's eyes seemed to face forward as if she were being controlled suddenly. She was still trying to cast some spells to suppress the demon, but her fingers suddenly stopped, and her arms fell to her sides. She seemed to have conceded as she muttered, "Could we have been a pair? But I have my mission." "Forget about your mission. Forget about your apprentice, Fan Qianshi. You have left enough for him, and even gave him a candle dragon's egg. You have taught him how to read the starry map, and equipped him with all the skills he needs to assume your role. Furthermore, all the materials in the forbidden place are sufficient to allow him to become the successor of the god of creation. You have treated him well. You should think about yourself now. Are you willing to die just like this? What can I do even if I am not willing? I am going to die soon. Why do I have to confess my feelings to him and make him sad?" Chapter 3008. Removing the Inner Demon 3. In fact, you don't have to die. You only need to kill Fan Qianshi in the next 4 hours and eat his heart. That way, you will be able to extend your life. Anyway, he is just your apprentice, and you have done enough for him. Moreover, you had saved his life before. It is reasonable for him to give up his life to you. Eat his heart, and you can live for another 10 years. You can spend a decade with Di Fui. Don't you want to wear the wedding attire that he prepared for his lover? Don't you want to see him wearing his real groom's attire? As long as you do what I say, you can achieve these aspirations. Perhaps the woman in white was truly contemplating those thoughts. It seemed that she was no longer trying to suppress it. The demon had found a way through to her, and continued its ascent to her head. By then, the black smoke had already reached her chin. Gu Shijio remained silent. Although the demon was now controlling most of the woman's movements, she somehow felt that the woman in white had a hidden attack up her sleeve. Sure enough, she noticed that the woman in white made a sudden move. Her finger swiftly went straight for her own chest. Gu Shijio heard a loud screech as a pale white figure wrapped in black smoke was ripped out from the woman's body. The screams did not stop as the woman repeatedly cast more spells on herself to extract the demon. A yellow light seemed to cover the pale shadow from head to toe, preventing it from returning into Gu Zijia's body. The pale figure was obviously her inner demon. Its face was still a little fuzzy, but its body was very similar to the woman in white. Needless to say, the inner demon had not seen this coming. It looked shocked. You actually removed me from your body. How is that even possible?" The woman in white was obviously in pain. Her face was terribly pale, and her white dress was completely stained with blood. She could not stand upright and was already swaying, but she kept her eyes on the inner demon the entire time. "I am the god of creation. How can a little inner demon like you control me? I have long known your existence. I knew that once I am weak, you will definitely come out to cause me trouble. Thus, I have thought of how to settle you in advance, and I had already prepared a spell for you. However, this spell can only be triggered when you climb up to my head. So, I have been waiting for it to happen." The inner demon remained silent. "But I knew all your thoughts. How were you able to conceal it from me?" The inner demon could not understand. "I had practiced this many times when I was free. I am already very familiar with it, so I didn't even have to think about it. I was emptying my mind just now. Didn't you notice it?" The demon was speechless. "I never expect you to be so cruel. I am cruel to everyone, including myself. The woman in white sounded calm, but her words were rather domineering. Okay. You can rest in peace here until the day you completely disappear. Once the woman in white uttered that last sentence, she began to practice at once. Then, she opened a hole in the air, resembling a portal, and threw the demon covered in a yellow wizardry barrier into the hole. Gu Shijie, who was forced to watch everything unfold from the side, remained silent. Her eyes seemed to follow the inner demon subconsciously, and once it went into the portal, her vision turned black. As her sight returned to her, she found herself still in the desert. Di Hao and Fan Qianshi were now around her. Meanwhile, the woman in white seemed to have black smoke circling her as she stood in front of Gu Shijie. She seemed proud as if she had achieved something. Shijie, how did you feel when you saw everything? You have watched the pain I suffered from the separation from you in your past life. I have been imprisoned in this desert for 100,000 years and suffered from the heat and cold. Can you imagine my luck today? Today you've finally fallen into my hands. Chapter 3009. You have talked too much. The woman in white's voice sounded very sinister. Nevertheless, Gu Shijie heaved a sigh and ignored her. She looked at her son first to check on him and felt relieved. Next, she glanced at Fan Qianshi, who was also watching her. The two looked at each other for a moment before Gu Shijie decided to look away. The sight of the man was enough to send discomfort to her stomach. Apparently, the man that she had wanted to kill all this while was her apprentice in her past life. It seemed that she used to care about this apprentice in her previous life, and she had undoubtedly sacrificed a lot for him. The revelation struck her like a thunderbolt. Nonetheless, it was evident that the catastrophic thunderbolts from the illusion were far worse than the one she imagined right now. Too many things were revealed in such a short period of time that she had not been able to digest everything. She had not had time to think clearly about the situation, and could not be bothered with Fan Qianshi for now. Then, her gaze returned to the woman in white. In the illusion, this demon was just a pale shadow. Even her facial features were not fully formed. But now, she looked exactly like Gu Shijie in her past life, and carried an auspicious aura around her, as though she was the god of creation. However, it was clear that the aura she carried was tinged with dark magic. Its magical power was already at its peak, so Gu Shijie was not considered as its opponent in her current state. How many years have you been locked up in this desert? Gu Shijie suddenly asked. The demon was stunned and did not seem to expect that question to come first, since Gu Shijie had seen so much of her past. It was already amazed by the fact that she could maintain her composure. However, the question seemed rather irrelevant, given that there were much bigger problems at hand. The woman in white stepped closer to Gu Shijie as she asked, "Are you not afraid?" Her voice was cold. Gu Shijie replied, "Will it help if I am afraid?" To which the demon laughed. "Indeed, it is useless. Your skills are not as good as mine now, and you are in my territory. Other than accepting your fate, there is no way out for you." The woman drew closer to Gu Shijie, and the magical aura around the body felt immensely cold. Gu Shijie could feel the cold despite being some distance away. She felt as though a snake had wrapped itself around her. Intuitively, she took a step back and secretly utilized her martial arts to circulate warmth around her body. In just a moment, the coldness was forced out of her body. Meanwhile, the demon sized her up as though she could see through the flesh of her victims. After a while she laughed. "You are just a little immortal that has been cultivating for 100 years. I didn't expect you to reincarnate into such a weak being." Gu Shijie also laughed, but her voice was cold when she replied, "Even if I am weak, I am in my original body. No matter how strong you are just an inner demon. As far as I know, no matter how strong an inner demon is, it would not be stronger than the person in its original body, and cannot do anything to destroy the original body." The demon's facial expression changed at once as it coldly said, "Stop dreaming. Do you think I am just your inner demon?" She raised her sleeves and continued, "I am no longer just the demon who you tricked and drew out from your body in the past. In fact, I will get back everything that I have lost in that year, including your current husband, Di Fui. I love him the most. I turned into a demon because of him, but he actually married you, a woman who is so weak. You don't deserve him. You didn't deserve him even in your previous life. Gu Shijiu was speechless. Why did everyone like her husband so much? Even this demonic being was actually his fangirl. Gu Shijiu smiled slightly and she answered, "It's good that you like him." The demon stared at her as she asked, "Are you not jealous?" Gu Shijiu responded leisurely, "There are too many women who like him. If I am jealous of everyone, I will become the queen of jealousy. However, when many women like him, it proves that he is good enough to be my husband, and also proves that my taste is very good. I am pleased." Published at 26th of May, 2020, 2:50 and 7 seconds AM. Chapter 3010. 3010. The demon was speechless. Sponsored content. Remove ads. She squinted her eyes at Gu Shijiu and smiled coldly. "It seems that you think no one can take him away from you. Are you so confident?" "Of course." Gu Shijiu answered very firmly. The demon smiled leisurely as she continued. "Others may not be able to do the job, but I can. Because I used to be you, and I am much better than you right now." Gu Shijiu chuckled. Apparently she did not believe it. "Do you not believe it? Well, I will show you and let you see it with your own eyes. Perhaps that is what it will take to shatter your spirits." The last message managed to catch Gu Zijia's attention. How did this woman in white intend to shatter her spirits? Sponsored content. Remove ads. It did not take long for Gu Shijiu to understand what the demon had meant. The demon actually created a shady screen with a wave of her sleeve. The scene looked incredibly realistic with grass and trees scattered everywhere. Even the brick walls were all very clear. Perhaps one could say that it looked more realistic than an HD TV. The area was filled with peach blossoms and appeared to be surrounded by mountains and rivers. The peach blossom trees were all over the place, and it revealed the corner of a green roof building in it. Nevertheless, despite the stunning details, none of them were actually very important. The most important thing was that she saw Difui. She also saw the inner demon, who was now dressed in green. Gu Zijia's eyes fell on Difui, and her heart sank a little. Sponsored content. Remove ads. Difui was wearing a very special purple robe. Although this purple robe was the style he often wore, it had a star embroidered on his left shoulder. That was Gu Zijia's doing. A few years ago, when Difui took her to the clan of the mermaid family, they attended an embroidery workshop. The embroiderers there were very skillful. That day, Gu Shijiu suddenly had the interest to learn the trade, so she studied under Aladi there for 2 days. Then, she took Difui's clothes to practice her newly acquired skill. Initially, she wanted to knit a small flower, but later, she was inspired to put a big star on his shoulder. She did not expect Difui to like the pair of robes so much. He wore it often when he wandered around the city. If anyone asked him about the star on his shoulder, he would always reply with great satisfaction, "It was sewed on by my wife. How does it look?" Those people naturally complimented it, and remarked on the craftiness of his wife. Difui would be very satisfied by their response, and it quickly became his favorite set of robes. Gu Shijiu certainly did not expect to see him on the screen with this set of robes on. When he first appeared, he looked a little embarrassed and sweaty, as if he had desperately rushed to this place. Sponsored content. Remove ads. Was he real? Did he actually come for her? He looked exhausted. It seemed like Flying Serpent must have informed him when it noticed something was not right. Gu Shijiu had not seen him for almost a month. Seeing him warmed her heart, and she subconsciously wanted to approach him. But just when she took a step forward, the demon waved her sleeve, and a black golden light flashed. From then on, Gu Shijiu could not move. The demon put one hand on her shoulder and said, "Don't worry, you can watch the show." Gu Shijiu bit her lip as she was curious to see what would happen. She glanced at the demon and then looked back at the woman dressed in green in the scene. "Who is that?" "An avatar that I have created." The woman in white smiled. Her tone was smug. Gu Shijiu looked at the green dress woman in the scene, and the way she interacted with Difui. She was very expressive and seemed to emulate Gu Zijia's movements perfectly. It would definitely be difficult to differentiate her from the real person. As she watched on, She realized that the woman actually knew some of the things between them. For example, she knew how long Gu Shijie and Di Fui had been apart, which was something that Gu Shijie had not revealed to anyone. Gu Shijie stared at the woman in white and asked, "How did she know about the things between Fui and me? If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Note: please download the sponsor's game to support us." Chapter 30:11. You have talked too much. 3. The woman in white chuckled as she replied, "It's very simple. I read some of your memories earlier, so I know everything between you and him." The woman's hand that was still sitting on Gu Zijie's shoulder suddenly felt significantly heavier. "Shijie, don't forget, I used to be a part of you. It is easy for me to sense your memory." Gu Shijie did not answer her, and continued to watch as the scenes unfolded. She saw Di Fui and the woman in green walk into an elegantly furnished small courtyard. She heard Di Fui praise the layout and design of this little courtyard, and she inadvertently bit her lip. The inner demon looked at Gu Shijie proudly. "So what if you are in your original body? You have many flaws. For example, you are not an expert in interior design. Also, you have a terrible sense of beauty and fashion. And most importantly, I am so much stronger than you." Gu Shijie heaved a sigh as she asked, "Since you are my inner demon, you should also carry the same flaws as me. How can you be good at what I am bad at?" The demon responded leisurely, "I have swallowed the souls of many craftsmen, so it is easy for me to extract any knowledge from them. I am not only a master of design, but also a master of cooking. Additionally, my embroidery skills are also amazing. The flowers I sew are so realistic to the point where you can almost smell the aroma. Did you see the wedding gown earlier? I embroidered it." Then, she glanced at the star on Di Fui's shoulder and looked disgusted. "Is that your design? It is hideous. After your reincarnation, you seem to be worse than before. Someone like you doesn't even deserve to carry his shoes. How did you even get him to marry you?" The woman in white obviously hated Gu Shijie to the core. She insulted her at every opportunity to constantly remind Gu Shijie how useless she was in the present. Nevertheless, Gu Shijie remained silent all the while as she continued to watch the screen. In fact, she did not seem to be listening to the woman in white. Meanwhile, the woman in white kept her eyes on her and suddenly sneered. "You have changed." Gu Shijie just nodded but still did not say anything. Her calmness made the woman extremely frustrated. "You have lost your passion. You seem just like a piece of wood." The god of creation of the past, Gu Shijie, would not have been so calm if she encountered such an incident. It was then that Gu Shijie replied faintly, "Don't treat me like her. Even though I used to be her, it was only in the past." The woman in white snorted. "You are right. You are not as good as her. Too bad your annoying looks have not changed." Gu Shijie answered, "Thank you for the compliment." The woman in white was raging. She did not intend to praise her. When she was about to say something, Gu Shijie put the finger on her lips. "Hey, shut up. Since you are so knowledgeable, you should know that you should remain silent when you watch a movie. Since you want me to watch the show, let me watch it comfortably. You have talked too much." The woman in white was speechless. Her face gradually became blue. Fortunately, it seemed things were about to get hot in on the screen. The woman in green wanted to change into her wedding dress in front of Di Fui. Although Gu Shijie had been very calm until now, she felt a little anxious about what was going to happen next. Would Di Fui really watch her change? Although the woman in green looked the same as her, she was not Gu Shijie. Therefore, she did not want him to look at another woman's body. She would certainly be jealous. The woman in white finally saw that Gu Shijie had become a little anxious. She sneered again. "Now you are anxious, right? Later on they will have sex. Then you can see how your husband pleases another woman." Chapter 30:12. No more intimate show. Gu Shijie bit her lip, but did not utter a word. She had already made up her mind that if Di Fui really watched the woman in green get changed, she would try to wash his eyes once they were reunited. For example, she would tempt him with her own body or give him a pole dance to stimulate him, but then force him to keep a distance. He can watch the show but will not be able to touch her body. It was going to be a form of punishment for him. Humph. How does it feel when you watch your husband pampering another woman? The woman in white refused to let it go and continued to taunt her. Gu Shizhou did not answer her question but asked, "Since you also like him very much, do you feel good when you see him with another woman?" The white woman laughed, and her eyes seemed to widen oddly. "I forgot to tell you. Since she is my avatar, I will be able to feel anything that she feels. It can also be said that we share our feelings. If he is intimate with her, it is the same as being intimate with me. I will naturally feel good about what happens next." Gu Shizhou remained silent. Was there such a thing? Inside the illusion, Di Fui watched the woman in green with interest as she removed her skirt and shirt. Seeing that she was about to take off her undershirt, Di Fui suddenly asked, "Where is Hao Er? Have you seen him?" The woman in green was stunned by the odd question and sighed. "No, I was trapped here since I entered and have not been able to get out. In fact, I am also worried about his safety, but unfortunately," she sighed softly and seemed to be in tears. "Fui, let's not think about those unhappy things at this moment. I haven't put on this wedding dress for you to see." Di Fui gazed at her and said, "Shizhou, is it more important to look for Hao Er or to have another wedding here?" The green-dressed woman remained silent. She hesitantly replied, Of course, it is important to find Hao Er, but we can't go out now. It's useless." Di Fui interrupted her. "What if I have a way out?" The woman in green was stunned and wondered. "Do you? How is it possible?" "How is it impossible? Don't forget, I am a master at breaking wizardry barriers. As long as I want to go out, no place can trap me." The woman paused for a moment and looked around. "Well, it's very comfortable here. I actually love this place so much. I was even thinking of staying here with you one day and just stay free from the worldly problems outside. Shizhou, no matter how good it is an illusion after all. We have to look for Hao Er. Hao Er is likely suffering now and waiting for us to save him. You have to think about him." The woman in green could not argue with him. She strongly suppressed the desires in her heart, but was still reluctant. "What method do you have to go out?" Di Fui walked around the house and seemed to be looking through the things in the room, seemingly looking for the key to break the barrier. Meanwhile, the woman followed beside him. In the desert, the woman in white looked at the screen and pursed her lips. Gu Shizhou flicked her finger as she replied, "No more intimate show then." The woman in white sneered. "Don't be so proud. Di Fui can't break the wizardry barrier. I will wait for him to study it for a moment. When he realizes that he can't break it, I will bring up the wedding to him again. At that time he will have no reason to turn me down." She glanced at Gu Shizhou again. "It seems that he is not as interested in you as you thought." Chapter 30:13. Was her son an illusion? Gu Shizhou looked down at the ground as she replied softly, "We are already an old couple that is familiar with each other. Naturally, the demand for this type of activity is weak. What's more, he is practicing his immortality. There is not much desire in his body now." The woman in white's pretty face seemed to suggest that she was a little suspicious of what Gu Shizhou had said. She moved closer to Gu Shizhou as she wanted to reread her mind. However, Gu Shizhou was a great deity. Whether it was her body or soul, there was a natural barrier that could end up injuring the woman in white, so she did not go too deep into Gu Zhijia's memories before and was reluctant to try again. Hence, she was not sure if what Gu Shizhou said was true. She ended up just staring into Gu Zhijia's eyes and sighed. "That's because you're too weak. After some time with him, he has seen your shortcomings. He knows that you are not worthy of his love, so he has lost his interest in you. Fortunately, I am different from you. I am stronger than you, and I know more than you and have a better personality than you. Once I am together with him, I will never let him get bored again. He will be happy every single day and love me very much." Gu Shizhou sighed. This demon seemed to have eaten a lot of mistresses. She sounded like a typical mistress right now. This demon looked like Gu Shizhou, but her mind. Was her mind just a collection of mistresses? The woman in white's eyes then returned to the screen. From time to time, she commented on one or two things with a tone that was full of superiority. It seemed that Di Fui could not find the entrance to the illusion, so it was only a matter of time before the two became intimate with one another again. Meanwhile, Gu Shijie was no longer focused on the mirage. Instead, she looked at Di Hao, who was next to her. Di Hao was standing quietly beside her. He did not seem to want to be noticed, but when he saw Gu Shijie looking at him, he called her mother. There was a little hoarseness in his voice, but it still sounded like him. Gu Shijie frowned as Di Hao's behavior seemed rather odd for this situation. It seemed like he was controlled by this demon, and unable to move freely. She looked at Fan Qianshi again, and Fan Qianshi looked at her for a moment before he looked up at the sky arrogantly. She did not know what he was thinking, but he was quiet from the beginning until now. Had he been restrained too? Gu Shijie glanced at her son again, and her heart suddenly moved. Was her son an illusion? Knowing Di Hao, even if he were unable to go forward and fight with the woman, he would be actively voicing out his dissatisfaction and the woman in white's actions. However, he was so well behaved to the point where it almost felt as though he did not exist. This was not like Di Hao at all. However, Gu Shijie wanted to ask Di Hao a few things to verify his identity, but then the woman in white blocked her view by standing between Gu Shijie and Di Hao. Gu Shijie looked at her and asked, "What's the matter with you?" The woman in white squinted her eyes. "Are you really not concerned that he will get intimate with me?" Gu Shijie was speechless. To be honest, she was not very concerned. The woman in white suddenly laughed. "You think he will be able to break the wizardry barrier, right? I might as well tell you, the key to the barrier is on my body. He can't find it." But just as she said those words, her body suddenly trembled. She felt something and quickly looked back into the mirage. Inside the elegant house in the mirage, Di Fui had gone around the place twice now with the woman in green tailing him. However, the man stopped all of a sudden, and the woman crashed into his back. Chapter 30:14. It turns out that he likes this style. Di Fui turned around and caught her in time, so the woman in green ended up falling into his arms. In their intimate encounter, she blew hot breath into his ear as she said, "As I told you, we can't break it." "No, we can. But Shijie, you have to bear with me for a while." Di Fui sighed. What do I have to bear with?" The green-dressed woman opened her eyes widely while still in his arms. "Close your eyes." Di Fui sounded like he was trying to seduce her. The woman in green's eyes flashed with curiosity, but she closed her eyes in anticipation. She could feel Di Fui's palm pressed gently on her lower abdomen. The heat made the woman's cheeks blush. At the same time, the woman in white in the desert also blushed. Apparently, she was feeling the same sensation as her avatar. Quickly, she proudly glanced at Gu Shijie and remarked, "It turns out that he likes this style." However, before she could finish her sentence, her body suddenly trembled, and her facial expression suddenly changed. She was even paler than before. The scene in the mirage had also seen a quick turn of events. While Di Fui had his palm on her abdomen, it had suddenly turned into a sharp knife. The knife went down straight into the belly of the woman. He knew the exact location of the acupuncture point that he wanted to attack, and did it in such an unexpected way. Therefore, the woman in green did not have time to block the attack. The green-dressed woman screamed and turned pale very quickly. She struggled for a moment in his arms and said, "You, Fui, what are you doing?" She wanted to push him away, but was still unsure of what was going on. On the other hand, Di Fui did not hold back. He twisted the sharp knife around in her belly. The woman screamed, and her body eventually turned into yellow sand. Right when the woman in green disappeared, the peach-filled scene began to collapse at once. Back in the desert, the woman in white looked as though she had been stabbed with a knife. She suddenly bent down and looked utterly shocked. How could it be? She had placed the exit key of the wizardry barrier in such a strange place, and yet Di Fui was able to see it. Where did she go wrong? The woman in white clenched her fists tightly in agony and frustration. Her skills were extremely high, so even though the avatar's ability was not as powerful as hers, it should be equivalent to Di Fui's current power. If Di Fui had not attacked out of the blue, there was no way that he could succeed. She looked at the collapsed peach blossom scene in the mirage, and her pretty face turned greenish. On the contrary, Gu Shijie looked very pleased with the outcome. She knew that the woman in white shared the same feeling as her avatar, so since the woman in green disappeared, at the very least, this woman should be severely injured. Nevertheless, just when Gu Shijie was distracted by the positive outcome, the woman in white suddenly leaped into the air, and her palm turned into a sword that pierced into Di Hao's chest. Although Gu Shijie was initially really suspicious about whether Di Hao was an illusion, watching this scene and cleared up any doubts. She was shocked, and her facial expression revealed it. Stop! Blood sprayed out from Di Hao's chest at once, and he seemed to be in pain. His small body trembled while his eyes kept looking at Gu Shijie. His little mouth opened slightly as he struggled to scream. Mother! Save! Gu Shijie felt as though someone had knocked her head really hard. Bitch you! She did not even finish her sentence before the woman in white suddenly rushed forward in her direction. Gu Shijie only felt a gust of wind blow on her face, and her body trembled for a moment. Then everything around her turned black. When she opened her eyes again, she found that she was floating in the air. That was not a good sign, as it meant that her soul was out of her body now. She subconsciously looked down and found that her body was not lying on the ground. Instead, it seemed to be hovering above the ground and looking up at her. Gu Shijie quickly looked around, also realized that the woman in white was missing. Chapter 30:15. The game. In the game, Gu Shijie suddenly understood what had happened. Her body had been stolen. The demon hid her soul away when she was in turmoil over Di Hao, and then took the opportunity to seize her body. Nevertheless, since Gu Shijie was a great deity, she could condense her soul into another solid body. When she was about to pinch a spell, the demon flicked her finger, and a big hole suddenly appearing beside Gu Shijie. This big hole had a strong suction force and sucked Gu Shijie's soul into it. Everything was a blur to Gu Shijie for a moment, but when things cleared up, she found herself in a transparent cell. The reason why she called it a transparent cell was that she could see everything in the desert from this cell. She seemed to have been separated from the desert by just a transparent film. She even found that she could also hear the demon speaking. The demon was feeling smug. It seems he could actually tell that it was my avatar. But now that I have occupied your shell, I doubt he would be able to distinguish us. Even if he did, he would not use a knife on me. Shijie, I did not like your useless body. However, I will occupy it for Fui. I will use your body and live happily ever after with him. Gu Shijie cursed at her. You are such a pervert. Her inner demon smirked. Am I? I have more unusual things to show you. This water prison was designed by me, especially for you. You will experience a mixture of water and fire in it. You have trapped me in this desert for 100,000 years, so I want to trap you in this water prison for millions of years. While she talked, there was some black water present in the cell. This black water emerged from the bottom of her feet and quickly passed her leg to her waist. This black water was obviously different from any kind of water that Gu Shijie had seen. What she quickly realized was that nothing could float in it. She could only watch the black water flowed past her chest to her neck, and then reached her chin. It did not take long before her entire body was submerged in it. By right, if Gu Shijie was in her soul form, she did not need to breathe and should not be afraid of the water. However, after she was submerged in it, it felt like she was sitting in a pot of boiling water. It did not feel like a normal burning fire, but she could definitely feel as though she was being burnt. Gu Shijie also realized that she had a need to breathe, but she could not. It did not take long before her vision started to turn black. But just when she felt like she was going to faint, the black water retreated, and her head was just above the water. The water was really black, so there was nothing that she could see when the water had reached the top of her head. With the water level falling, she could finally see what was happening, and her heart sank at once. She noticed that she was now watching a scene in the Gobi Desert. The Gobi Desert was full of large and small black stones that distinguished it from any other desert. At the moment, 3 people were standing in the Gobi Desert: Di Fui, Di Hao, and Gu Shijie. When the illusion of Peach Blossom Garden collapsed, Di Fui fell from the inside and landed in the Gobi Desert. The moment he landed in the desert, He seemed to sense something and quickly turned to see what appeared to be a mother and her son not too far away. Gu Shijio seemed to be seriously injured. Her face was pale, and there was blood on her lips. Nevertheless, she refused to treat her own wounds and was busy treating Dihao instead. Dihao's chest was stained red with blood. Apparently he was seriously injured too. His eyes were closed, and he seemed to be in a drowsy state. Gu Shijio seemed to hear some movements in the desert, and drew a sword out in her hand. Who? When her eyes saw the person in the distance, she paused and stood still. She looked at the man in disbelief. Fui. Her voice trembled slightly. Chapter 30:16. A raccoon for a prince. She seemed to want to rush over to him, but she did not dare to do so this time. Besides, she was still holding her sword tightly in her hand. You has that bitch disguised you? Don't you try to hurt my son. Gu Shijio looked rather disheveled at that time. Her hair was all over the place while her clothes were untidy. There was even a little dirt on her pretty face. It was only her eyes that were still shining like stars. It seemed that the woman was the true Gu Shijio and no longer an impersonation. Di Fui sighed with relief and opened his arms to her. He seemed to carry an unsuspecting posture that suggested that he was the real Di Fui. Baby, who do you think can impersonate me? Gu Shijio seemed to recognize him to be the real Di Fui. She started to tear at once and ran directly into his arms. You are finally here. Di Fui was stunned for a moment as he looked down at her while she was in his arms and raised his hand to put her messy to the back of her ears. After that, his eyes swept across the back of her left ear, where there was a tiny scar that could not be seen. A careful look. This feature was very hidden to the point where even Gu Shijio herself did not know about it. However, Di Fui had many intimate relations with her, so every part of her body was deeply imprinted in his mind. He could even remember all the small details. As the little scar was there, it proved that she was indeed the real Gu Shijio. At the very least, this body was hers. But if it were her, the posture that she used to cuddle him did not feel quite the same. Gu Shijio always liked to hold his waist when she was in his arms. She always said that his thin and strong waist was pleasant to touch and gave her a sense of security. But now, when she rushed into his arms, her arms were wrapped around his back. It was a very subtle difference, and nothing else seemed wrong at the moment. Gu Shijio quickly gathered her emotions and walked to Dihao while holding hands with Di Fui. Let's check on Hao. He is seriously injured. Dihao had fainted, and the wound on his chest was treated halfway by Gu Shijio. When Di Fui looked at the wound, he knew that the injury would be fatal if it were not treated timely. He analyzed his son's wound and had applied an elixir on the injury, but there was no stitching, so blood kept oozing out from time to time. Shijio, I think it would be better to sew the wound. Di Fui suggested. Gu Shijio paused for a moment and said, Well, Fui, why don't you do it for him? Di Fui stared at her and replied, Shijio, I am not as good as you at stitching. Gu Shijio bit her lips as she replied, I know, but I have also been hurt. I am very, very uncomfortable now. I am afraid that I will not be able to concentrate on it. Otherwise, I would have already stitched it up nicely for him. Di Fui immediately took her hand and asked, Are you hurt? Where is the injury? Come, let me have a look. He wanted to check her pulse for her. Gu Shijio quickly pulled off her hand away and said, My injuries are not urgent. I can treat myself. You should treat Hao first. I am afraid that he will not be able to delay his treatment any longer. Our kid is more important. Di Fui glanced at her again, and was still worried. It's okay, let me check on you first. It won't take too much time. He raised his hand and pulled her into his arms. Gu Shijio's body stiffened, and there was a slight change in her facial expression. This position was very similar to the posture Di Fui had in the illusion, just before he stabbed her with a knife. Intuitively, she quickly pushed him away and stayed out of his arms. Subconsciously, she took 2 steps back, and as soon as she looked up, she saw Di Fui staring at her. Awkwardly, she said, Our son is in danger. Why aren't you tending to him first instead of pulling me close to you? Go and help him. Chapter 30:17. A raccoon for a prince too. Alright, then you should treat your injuries first. I will focus on our son. Di Fui then went to check on their son. Gu Shijiu watched Di Fui from the side as he treated Di Hao's injuries. It seemed to be working, so she sighed with relief. Then, she turned to look at a large gray stone at the side that was not far away. Her lips seemed to curve upward all of a sudden. In the water prison, the water level had gone down slightly to that Gu Zijia's head was revealed just enough that she could see the entire scene. She was watching the demon at that very moment. The demon was obviously able to see her, and the smile on her lips was meant to ridicule her and express her triumph. Gu Shijiu clenched her fists under the water. Her body was hot and uncomfortable, and she could still hear the voice of the demon. Is this water prison comfortable? This will be your permanent residence, and I will replace you in your own life and be loving to Fui. I will travel all over the mountains and rivers with him, and will take good care of your 2 children for Fui. You can stay here in peace and quietly wait for the last day of your life. Gu Shijiu thought to herself that the woman must be dreaming. Di Fui would surely notice it. Gu Shijiu snorted in her heart as she turned her attention to Di Fui, hoping that he could see her. Since the demon could look at her and send a directed audio into the water prison, maybe Di Fui could also do so. Perhaps he might find the place unusual and choose to explore it. Nevertheless, before she could wait until Di Fui looked in her direction, she was, once again, drowned by the black water. This time, the temperature of the weak water seemed to have risen by 3 or 4 degrees. The pain was unbearable, so she forcibly tried to set up a wizardry barrier to isolate the black water from herself. However, it was tough to set up such a wizardry barrier as a soul. She could only support it for 5 to 6 minutes before she felt that she was going to faint. Fortunately, the black water finally retreated just then so she could take a deep breath. Unfortunately, the air she breathed in seemed to carry some heat with it too that made her throat burn. Although she was usually calm, at the moment, her heart was burning like a flame. She could not help but look outwards again, and her heartbeat almost skipped a beat. Di Fui was standing very close to the prison. In fact, his palms were just above the prison, so she could see it up above. Fui. The black water became hotter as she got closer to the front to try to communicate with him. Nevertheless, Gu Shijiu did not care about the heat and rushed over. Fui. She shouted with a hoarse voice as she rushed forward. She pushed through the water with a large force that made swirls in the black water. She shouted as loud as she could to the point where her ears almost burst. However, there was no response. Di Fui did not respond at all. His sight was clearly fixed on the water prison, but he could not see her at all. He looked at the water prison like a stone. There was no expression at all on his handsome face. Gu Shijiu endured the pain of the boiling water, and put her palm on the transparent film to try to touch his hand. Fui. Fui. She called him as her eyes turned red. The wall was hot and felt like boiling magma. It even sizzled a little when her hand touched it to the point where she could smell something burning. It was strange that even as a soul, she could be burnt and even smell it. She bit her lips tightly and pressed her hand on the wall again, as she called out to him over and over again. She only hoped that he was able to hear him telepathically. Don't call him anymore. Once again, the demon voice was heard through the top of the water prison. She continued to gloat. He will not see you even if you shout at him until you lose your voice. What he sees is only a stone. Published at 28th of May, 2020, 2:45 and 6 seconds p.m. Chapter 3018. 3018. Was she sealed away in a big boulder? Sponsored content. Remove ads? From Di Fui's perspective, what he could see was indeed just an ordinary boulder. After stitching up Di Hao's wound, he placed him on a large rock to rest. Then he decided to take a stroll around the place, and coincidentally stood in front of the boulder where Gu Shijiu was trapped. This rock was no different from the other rocks in the area. It was about half the height of an average person, and felt cold and hard when he touched it. Gu Shijiu knew that he could not see anything abnormal with it, so she acted smug to Gu Shijiu. Nevertheless, her facial expression showed that she was concerned. Fui, how is Hao-er? The impostor asked in a kind and gentle way, making her sound like a loving mother. He is okay. Fortunately, I managed to treat him in time. Nevertheless, he needs to rest for about an hour before he can move again. Difui came to her and said, "Come here. Let me check on your injuries. Can you show them to me?" Sponsored content. Remove ads? Gu Zijia's eyes flashed a little before she stretched out her hand and let him examine her pulse. Due to her immense skill, her rate of recovery was excellent. Although Difui had recently stabbed her avatar and caused her great distress, the pain had already subsided by now. However, to play along with her earlier lie, she secretly exercised her spiritual power to hurt a vein of her body. Therefore, when Difui checked her pulse, her eyes purposely focused on the stone that Gu Shijie was sealed in to see her ashen face. The demon was very satisfied with the result and made it clear to Gu Shijie. In order to prevent any suspicion, she quickly returned her attention to Difui and leaned against him as she complained, "Fui, I am so tired." Difui wrapped one arm around her and said, "Lean on me." Sponsored content. Remove ads? Gu Shijie would not turn down the opportunity. As she laid on him, she could briefly smell his botus scent. She closed her eyes and subconsciously muttered, "It has been so many years. Yet the fragrance on your body has not changed." Difui looked at her and said, Gu Shijie mumbled, "Fui, I really miss the smell of your body. Finally, I can smell it today." She buried her face in his arms as she continued, "I will never leave you again." Difui remained silent. His eyes flashed slightly as he took her other hand to check her pulse. He casually said, "The vein leading to your heart is injured. Who hurt you and how air?" It was Fan Qianshi. He caught how air and tortured him. Fortunately, I came in time. Sponsored content. Remove ads? It is really him. Where is he now? Difui swiftly surveyed the place but did not see Fan Qianshi. When he heard how air, I was furious and wanted to kill him. In a desperate attempt to kill him, I seem to have subconsciously learned a new skill. However, I think the attack took a toll on my body, so as a result, my heart got injured. Fortunately, I managed to injure him seriously. The lie seemed airtight. Difui heaved a sigh of relief and held her hand. "It's fortunate that you and Hao Er are all right. As for the bastard, Fan Qianshi, I will end him sooner or later." Yeah. Gu Zijia's inner demon was satisfied by the response she received. She could not help but take another glimpse at the big boulder again, where Gu Shijie was sealed. Difui looked at their surroundings and asked, "What happened to this desert? Do you know?" "It is probably the array formation set by Fan Qianshi. As you know, he is the god of creation. Therefore, it is possible for him to turn the desert into a lethal array." All the blame was conveniently placed on Fan Qianshi. It became clear to Gu Shijie that Difui was happy with her explanations. He did not seem to doubt her at all. The two of them chatted for a while, and Difui was certainly curious about the skills that she had acquired on her own. Gu Shijie did not mind showing him as she wanted him to know that she was now stronger. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Note: please download the sponsors game to support us. Chapter 30:19. A Raccoon for a Prince 4. The few tricks she displayed were skills known by the former god of creation. They were extremely complex, so Difui looked surprised and clapped his hand to compliment her. "It is such a complex trick. Shijie, I never expected you to learn this without a teacher." Gu Shijie was feeling even more egotistical. "Yeah, I did not expect it as well. In fact, since entering the desert, I feel that I have self-learned a lot of things. They are not only limited to martial arts but also cooking and embroidery." She used her fingers to count the number of skills she was proficient in now and finally said, "I will show you the rest next time when we are free." Difui looked at her shiny eyes and sighed. "I didn't expect this desert to make you even more talented. It seems that it is a good place. Why don't we stay here for a longer period? Perhaps you may even acquire other skills." Gu Shijie frowned and spoke her mind. "No, I hate it here." Difui looked around and replied, "Although it is desolate here, there is nothing wrong with the place. You can practice your techniques here. Anyway, why do you hate the place?" Gu Shijie was stunned by his response and said, "I don't like desolate places, not to mention that Hao Er got injured here. I already dislike the place." Her lie was still airtight. Di Fui did not doubt her. After he checked her pulse and confirmed that she was fine, he let go of her hand and said, "If that is the case, then you should rest well. We still need to break out of this place with how air. I'm afraid that we will have to use a lot of strength later." Gu Shijiu nodded. "Okay." She paused for a moment before continuing. "I have been trapped here for many days, but I finally found a little doorway out. I will bring you there later." Di Fui smiled and just reiterated his earlier point. "You should rest well first." He raised his hand and pulled out a furry soft blanket and placed it on Gu Shijiu. Gu Shijiu reached out and tried to hold him. "Can you rest here together with me?" Di Fui patted her little hand and answered, "No, I am not tired. Nevertheless, you should rest. I will look around and see if I can find out the mechanism here in advance, so that I can bring you how air out earlier. This broken place is not suitable for recovery." Gu Shijiu naturally agreed, so Di Fui got up and left. Gu Shijiu watched him from behind as he left, and her eyes seemed to be glowing. This man was finally hers. She squinted at her little hand and looked at her body again before smiling at the big stone where Gu Shijiu was sealed. She spoke to her in a leisurely voice. "You have a good body. I will make sure to use it very well. You can rest assured." Her fingers stroked her arms and her chest before she joyfully remarked, "It's excellent to have a real body. It's unusually sensitive, unlike the body that I condense for myself using blood and flesh. Rest assured, I will make good use of this body and will love the man wholeheartedly." The directed audio she used was no ordinary means of communication. It was a technique that could only be used in this desert. She was trapped here for 100,000 years, and finally made the desert one with her. The few thousand grievances in the desert could be commanded as she wanted, so she used a unique method to use them to send her voice to Gu Shijiu. She did not even need to say anything out loud. Once her mind thought of something she wanted to convey, it could automatically pass it to the intended recipient. Di Fui would not be able to hear it. In fact, aside from Gu Shijiu, no one else would be able to hear the message. Hence, it was a safe means of communication. Published at 29th of May, 2020, 8:40 and 6 seconds AM. Chapter 3020. 3020. Gu Shijiu, who was still inside the water prison, seemed to be getting desperate. She closed her eyes and no longer bothered to converse with the inner demon. She just let the black water drown her over and over again. Sponsored content. Remove ads. 2 hours passed quickly, and Di Fui had come back. He carried Di Hao with him and said, "Shijiu, let's go." "All right." As Gu Shijiu got up, she subconsciously moved to his side and held his arm as she walked with Di Fui and Di Hao. As they were passing the boulder, Gu Shijiu subconsciously looked at the stone again. She saw the real Gu Shijiu just emerge from the black water, and coincidentally watched them pass her. She clearly saw that the trio was going to leave. This time, her eyes finally showed panic and despair. As expected, Gu Shijiu tried to add to her misery. "Shijiu, we are going now. You stay here. Rest assured, in order not to disturb your leisurely time here, I will seal this place and no longer let anyone enter. You can stay here for thousands of years." Gu Shijiu looked at the shadows of the three people gradually disappear, and felt as though she could no longer carry on. Sponsored content. Remove ads. The demon was impersonating her too well, and was even using her body now. Since the imposter used to be part of her past self, she naturally assimilated with the body very easily to the point where even Gu Shijiu herself would not be able to tell that something was off. Furthermore, Di Fui had just arrived, so he was not familiar with the desert. He did not know what had been happening and had no idea who was the real culprit behind everything. It was certainly easy to fool him now. Given the state of events, Gu Shijiu started to entertain the fact that she might be trapped here forever while the demon would use her body and live happily ever after with her husband and kids. The sheer possibility that this could happen made Gu Shijiu tremble in agony. She clenched her fists as she watched the three of them walk away. She was really desperate, and tears started to flow down her cheeks involuntarily. Sponsored content. Remove ads. Right at that moment, the black water rose again and submerged her completely. This time, she did not set up a wizardry barrier, so the hot black water burned her again. She trembled in pain, but she was too tired to struggle. If she were going to be trapped here for the rest of her life, she would rather have her soul dissipated. She gradually became dizzy under the water, and oddly, the pain did nothing to keep her awake. Sometimes dying was the easier option. Since Wuxia was a great deity, she could condense her soul into a solid form that was no different from a real body. She would not even age or die. However, this was only useful if she had the desire to live. Despite being a great deity, if Wuxia really wanted to end her life, she could exercise a technique to make her soul dissipate. Sponsored content. Remove ads? As she was now full of despair, she had the desire to die and dissipate her soul. She did not want to suffer any longer and live here endlessly. Mother, mother, do not leave Shuya. Mother, don't give up. When she was about to exercise the technique of dissipating her own soul, she heard a few shouts. They were from her two kids. There was fear in Dizuya's voice, and she sounded like she was crying. Meanwhile, Dihao's voice rang like a morning bell in her ear and shook her to the core. She opened her eyes in an instant and subconsciously looked around. She was still in the Blackwater prison, but there was no trace of Di Shuyue or Dihao. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Note: please download the sponsor's game to support us. Chapter 30:21. A Raccoon for a Prince. 6. Perhaps, the two of them were just an illusion after all. Little Shuyue should be safe in the palace of the Ninth Haven. But Dihao? Wuxia suddenly had cold sweat. If she guessed correctly, the boy she saw earlier was not the real Dihao. He was probably missing or locked away somewhere. Otherwise, Fan Qianshi would not disappear so silently. After all, he was the god of creation. No one could get rid of him so easily. Therefore, the most likely possibility was that Fan Qianshi and Dihao were both imposters or illusions designed to fool her. As Di Fui managed to escape from the inner demon's earlier trap, perhaps she decided to be more cautious this time around. Thus, she made the fake Fan Qianshi disappear, but was sure to keep Dihao around to make a more convincing case. Frankly, the demon only wanted to have Di Fui to herself. Hence, it was unlikely that she would harm him. However, she might not show any mercy to Dihao and Di Shuyue. After all, this demon hated the original Wuxia. With her amazing abilities, it would not be a surprise if she decided to make a fake Dihao and Di Shuyue and kill her two children. When this thought arose in her heart, Wuxia even noticed that there was sweat on her nose. A woman was weak, but a mother was naturally strong. If ordinary women could still live for the sake of their children, a lot more would be expected of Wuxia. She could not give up. She had to try to get out of here to save her two children. Even though the demon could use her body and act like her, it was impossible to hide it from the eyes of Di Fui. Her personality and character were surely different from the demon. Therefore, as time passed, Di Fui would find out the truth and would try to save her. It was just a matter of time. Hence, she had to be strong and find a way to escape. She began to explore the Blackwater prison carefully, as she did not believe that there would not be a way out. She was an expert in breaking wizardry barriers, so as long as she caught one loophole in the prison, she would be able to break out. The Blackwater prison was not small at all. From her point of view, it was the size of more than 10 houses. Although it was full of black water, the temperature was not the same at every location. Some places could burn people's skin, and some areas were just hot, but within an acceptable range. Wuxia gritted her teeth and decided to swim to the hottest place in search of a clue. If this Blackwater prison had an escape route, she believed that it must be hidden in the least accessible spot. The more dangerous the area, the more likely it was to be there. Summoning her courage, Wuxia took a leap of faith and searched the hottest area. Suddenly, she sensed something. She looked up and was shocked. She saw Di Fui standing outside the prison. From Wuxia's perspective, she was sure that he was looking inside the boulder for something. Wuxia was stunned for a while and rushed forward to him. Fui. However, Di Fui did not look at her. Perhaps he could not see her. Although his eyes were looking inward, he did not look at her. Wuxia could hear the sounds from outside, so she heard him whisper, "It should be this stone." He took a turn around the stone, and from Gu Zijia's perspective, he had done the same to the prison. "Shijio, are you inside? Don't be afraid." Di Fui pressed his palm on the stone, and passed a directed audio to her. He actually noticed it. He was indeed her husband. Regardless of how the demon disguised as her, he was still aware of it. He came to save her. The sudden glimpse of hope brought elation to Gu Shijio. She only felt that her nose was slightly sore now. Although she was still in the hot black water, her feelings of desperation, fear, and suicide disappeared without a trace. She smiled and put her hand on the wall, as if trying to touch his hand. "Fui, I am here." Published at 30th of May, 2020, 2:40 AM. Chapter 3022. 3022. Di Fui naturally could not hear her, but he left his palm on the stone for a moment to try to sense for any abnormalities. Nevertheless, he still could not feel anything. The boulder seemed ordinary to him, and there was nothing special about it compared with the rocks surrounding it. Sponsored content. Remove ads? He was sure that this was the one that he needed to explore, so the more she did not respond, the more worried he became. Di Fui took a deep breath to try to gather his thoughts. He believed that his instincts would not be wrong. He had noticed the woman who currently occupied Gu Zijia's body, constantly looking at it. Feeling confident that this was where Gu Shijia was locked away, he knew that he could not blindly break the rock, so as not to hurt her. He quickly thought of all the spells related to sealing away a person's soul into a stone and tried all of them, one by one, to see if he could get Gu Shijia out. His fingers seemed to be casting spells nonstop with light emerging from his hand and covering the boulder. However, they were all useless. Unfortunately, the stone was still standing there firmly without any change. It seemed that none of the spells could free Gu Shijia. Sponsored content. Remove ads? Meanwhile, Gu Shijia was still suffering inside the stone. She knew that Di Fui would know the way to save her. Although the spell he issued made the black water even hotter on the inside, she kept quiet the entire time and waited for the man to come up with the solution. Nonetheless, since the temperature had greatly risen, Gu Shijia started to feel dizzy. It seemed that the demon had put a unique wizardry barrier around the boulder to prevent anyone from trying to save her. The more people attempted to try to break the wizardry barrier, the worse the condition for the victim they were trying to rescue. The demon seemed to have thought of everything. She suspected that someone might try to save Gu Shijia, so she had come up with such a unique way to make her life more difficult. Even in her dizzy state, Gu Shijia continued to watch Di Fui's actions on the outside. She saw him continuously change the technique he used to break the wizardry barrier. Although these techniques were useless, they certainly consumed a lot of energy. She could see that his forehead was now drenched in sweat. She knew that he must be drained as he had been looking for Di Hao, and even used a forbidden move to rush over here. Not to mention that he had to handle the demon's avatar as well before treating Di Hao's wounds. Sponsored content. Remove ads? He must be exhausted. Gu Shijia looked at his slightly pale face and was very distressed. She wanted to stop him, but she could not pass any information out of the water prison. She was very anxious to the point where a thought suddenly flashed through her mind. Since the demon was from her own body, the skills that she knew should have also come from her. Perhaps the former Gu Shijia knew the solution to this water prison. When the thought flashed through her mind, there seemed to be a spell that she vaguely remembered that popped in her mind as well. Although it passed through her mind fairly quickly, Gu Shijia was quick enough to catch it. However, when she was about to cast it, she realized that she could not remember it anymore. Perhaps that was the way to break out of this water prison. Sponsored content. Remove ads? She closed her eyes again and tried to shut out the pain so that she could concentrate on her thoughts. When she was calm enough, she used a secret technique to track the thoughts that passed through her mind recently. Opportunely, her effort paid off as the spell flashed through her mind again. This time she remembered half of the spell. There was hope. She was about to try again, but her ears suddenly heard a loud crashing sound. It scared her for a moment, and she quickly opened her eyes. She was stunned. Di Fui. Di Fui actually. He actually came in. The man looked shocked as he obviously did not expect inside the stone to be in this condition. He was clearly terrified by what he saw and quickly looked at Gu Shijio to see if she was all right. His face turned green the moment he saw her. Intuitively, he rushed over to his wife. Shijio. Meanwhile, Gu Shijio was still in shock. The water prison appeared to still be the same from the inside. However, when Gu Shijio was in Di Fuyi's arms, and there seemed to be no black water on her, this was because Di Fuyi's wizardry barrier was also able to protect her. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Note: please download the sponsors game to support us. Chapter 3023 Meeting 2. How did you come in? Why did you come in? Did you know that you can't get out after entering? We may be trapped here forever. Oh yeah. How did you recognize that the person outside was not me? How did you know that I was locked inside here? When I saw you carrying Di Hao and walking away with her, I thought that you would never come back. Where is the demon? Gu Shijio had a lot of questions in her heart, and just blurted them all out in one go. You're so ugly. Di Fui did not answer her questions but sighed instead. Gu Shijio was stunned. Ah, you look really ugly. Di Fui was already treating her even while she was talking. Gu Shijio was even more stunned that she did not notice it sooner. She knew that she would not be as pretty as before. However, she did not expect Di Fui to comment on her appearance that way. Although she was still in her soul form, her soul managed to cultivate a physical body. Unfortunately, her skin was burned all over her body and even her face. Most of her hair was burnt off while the rest seemed to be eerily still attached to her scalp. In fact, she had always subconsciously protected her face. Whenever the water level rose and submerged her, she would try to cover her face to protect it so as to minimize any damage. Initially, her only plan was to escape from the place as fast as she could. She did not even think of her appearance for one moment, until Di Fui pointed it out. But right after he did, she wanted to take a look at herself in the mirror. When Di Fui realized what she was about to do, he unexpectedly covered her eyes. Don't look. Gu Shijio was speechless. If anything, he should be the one who should not look at her, right? Gu Shijio had once heard a story of a concubine that did not want her emperor to see her when she was ill as she was afraid that the emperor would see her in an ugly state. In the end, she died without the emperor getting to see her again, as she wanted the emperor only to remember her when she was beautiful. Using this logic, Gu Shijio should not let Di Fui see her at all given the condition that she was in. Otherwise, he might develop a phobia toward her and abandon her. But you feel disgusted. How ugly was she now? Despite the crazy situation that they found themselves in, Gu Shijio now contemplated if she would get a chance to wash away his memory sometime in the future, so that he would never recall her image at this time. Since you know I feel disgusted, you have to recover as quickly as possible. Come on, do exactly what I say. Di Fui quickly began to instruct her on how to treat her burns. However, Gu Shijio thought that this was not the most important thing to do right now. The black water here was able to erode any wizardry barrier and eventually absorb their spiritual power, so getting out of here should be their main objective. Although the wizardry barrier that Di Fui had set up was currently stable, it would not be able to last for long. It would be consumed by the black water sooner or later and break down. If that were to happen, all their efforts to treat Gu Zijia's burns would be wasted. She took a deep breath and discussed with him. You forget about my injuries. Let's try to break out of here first. I am afraid that Hao Air is still in danger, and is waiting for us to save. I have a spell that I am thinking about in my mind, and I think it's a solution, but I can only remember half of it. The other half is still missing. Let me tell you what I can remember, and see if you know the rest. No, I will treat you first. This cannot be delayed. Gu Shijio was a little anxious by his reply. Even if I recover, it's useless if I have to fall into the black water again later. Di Fui quietly listened to her, but he did not stop his fingers from continuing to treat her injuries. After she finished speaking, he continued, Rest assured, I will not let you fall into the hot water again. Heal yourself first. But Hao Air? Shijio, in my heart, you are my first priority. Di Fui interrupted her. Chapter 30-24. Meeting 3. Gu Shijio did not answer, and Di Fui realized that he had been quite harsh to her ever since their reunion. In the end, he sighed and lowered his voice as he continued. All right, Shijio, I am sure that Hao Er is doing just fine. You should be worried about yourself right now. Your injuries cannot be left untreated any longer. Please do as I say. At this time, Gu Shijio was feeling more relieved by his reassurance. She listened to his instructions and started channeling her spiritual power as instructed. Di Fui assisted her whenever he could and estimated that it would take an hour for the wounds to develop connective tissues and turn into scars. While the treatment proceeded, Di Fui also managed to answer all of her questions. I had to use the soul-extracting spell to be here. I did not know anything that was going on here, but I had to come. Don't worry. There is nothing that can stop me from going out. If there are any hindrances, it only means that I need to put in a little more effort. We have been married for so long. There is nothing about you that I do not know. Other than her physical body, which I believe belongs to you, the two of you have nothing in common at all. I realized that something was off as soon as she put herself into my arms. Nevertheless, I took some time to entertain her because I was not sure if your soul was also trapped in the body. A few touches were enough for me to tell that your soul was not there. It was easy for me to tell that you were trapped here because the woman had thought that I was fooled, so she lost all her bearings in a moment of pride. She kept throwing glances at this rock as if showing off to someone. I would not dare to address myself as your husband if I failed to see that you are here. Yes, I went away with Hao Er because I realized that her strength was evil and powerful. I would be defeated if we were to get into a head-on battle. Fortunately, I found an excuse to get away from her to do some preparations before I led her into a trap. I needed to buy more time so that I could come back to you. Also, the person that you saw was not Hao Er. He answered everything succinctly. Gu Shijio felt that all her concerns were responded to at once. Gu Shijio could still talk while she was carrying out her treatment, so she replied. I somehow knew that Hao Er was fake, but I was not able to prove it before I was imprisoned. The dark water continued to rise while they talked, but Di Fui's wizardry barrier was strong enough to resist the pressure. Therefore, the rising water only managed to cover up the wizardry barrier, and did not penetrate it. Gu Shijio was unduly frightened, especially when she found out that the majority of her skin was severely burned. She thought that she would never be able to recover. But as always, Di Fui's presence shone a light of hope on her. He looked a little sad, but he remained composed the entire time. He would still joke around with her as though everything was going to be all right. Of course, she found it very reassuring. Of all the people in the world, Gu Shijio was the one who knew him best. He always had a solution to every problem. They had been through many hardships together, and overcame all of them with ease thanks to his quick wits. She was sure that it would be the same this time. Joyfully, she hugged Di Fui's waist and said, I know you will always find a way. As for Gu Zijia's injuries, burns were the hardest to endure, especially the ones that she had just suffered. Di Fui knew how it must have felt as he got a taste of it when he first arrived. It was a pain that not even the toughest man could easily withstand. Di Fui took a look at the woman in his arms before he rubbed her head most affectionately. It is okay to scream if you are still in pain. Don't hold it in. No one else can hear you. I am feeling much better now. Gu Shijio dismissed his concern. Di Fui continued to look at her. When I was examining your pulse, I noticed that you tried to use the soul dissipating spell. Did you try to kill yourself? I thought that I was never going to leave this place. Hence, I would rather die than be trapped here for all eternity. Gu Shijio answered in a firm tone. Chapter 30-25. Meeting 4. Di Fui took another glance at the surrounding black water, and seemed to have a thought. There must be something in the water that is affecting your state of mind. You are not the kind of person who gives up so easily. Gu Shijio was hit by a sudden realization too. When did she become so weak and vulnerable? It was not the end of the world. Even if it was and everything came crashing down, she would normally be out there challenging the impossible. Suicidal thoughts would never be her option. It was then that she realized that the murky water corroded not only her skin, but also diminished her willpower. Difui continued to have a conversation with her, while treating her wounds. During their exchange, Gu Shijiu told him everything that happened here before he came. Obviously, the background of the woman in white came as an unpleasant surprise to Difui. That explains it. When I looked into the depths of her soul trying to find out who she was, I realized that she was just like you. I was utterly shocked, thinking that your soul had been swollen whole, which resulted in her looking exactly like you too. I did not realize that she was a demon that used to be part of the deepest obsession in your past life. Gu Shijiu was only a few hundred years old, which put her at a significantly more tender age compared to Difui, whose lifespan was stretched over tens of thousands of years in total. Many things that she could not solve were no problems for Difui at all. It seemed Difui knew a lot more than her about demons. In fact, Gu Shijiu still wondered where she harvested all of her power. Also, it was rather strange that the demon truly had many of her characteristics, but perhaps they were skewed toward being more stubborn and ruthless. Gu Shijiu had doubts about the demon's intention, and whether or not the images that she saw about her previous life were real. Needless to say, she found it unbelievable that Fan Qianshi was actually her disciple in her previous life. She had no good feelings about this so-called disciple of hers. His hypocrisy and deceit were extremely bizarre. Difui explained, "If I am not mistaken, those images that you saw were real. However, your understanding of the demon is not entirely correct. A demon is not a reincarnation of your soul, but an obsession that is rooted in you. You must have lacked some sort of fulfillment in your previous life, which prompted the demon to grow and become independent. Oddly, it should only exist in your mind rather than have its own concrete existence. The most that it can do is to stick to the physical body it originated in, and control the person's mind to commit something illogical. But this woman has become an independent individual, which is really odd. Do you think the situation is different because the demon belonged to the creation deity? A thought will still be a thought, regardless of whose mind it belonged to," Difui answered. A sudden realization dawned on Gu Shijiu. "I once heard that your father used to have a demon who impersonated him as an independent individual," Gu Shijiu added. "I heard about that from my father too. Even though his demon is an independent individual, it still adheres to him. Their characters are almost the same, but the demon is a little bit more stubborn. Also, the demon cannot stay too far away from him. He literally lives in the same mountain as my father, and they will meet once every 6 months. He has an unshakable loyalty to my father, and has never gone against his will. This demon of yours, quite the contrary, wants you dead. I also find it rather odd that she has been able to exist for so long. Could someone have been helping her this whole time?" Gu Shijiu was suddenly inspired. Difui agreed. "Probably. It must be someone with a compelling background and a broad knowledge in all sorts of wayward doctrines." Chapter 30-26. Could it be Fan Qianshi? Could it be Fan Qianshi? Based on their interactions in the desert earlier, it seemed that he was also helplessly trapped. In fact, he did not even seem to be able to put up a fight against the demon. Difui thought about it for a moment and gave his opinion. "As you said, the demon has been trapped here, undisturbed and unmoved for tens of thousands of years. It only emerged as a problem about 20,000 years ago, which indicates that someone must have dropped by and disrupted the balance in the desert, turning it into a tool for the demon to consume lives and grow its power. There are 2 possible reasons why the demon has become independent. First of all, she inherited some memories and capabilities from the creation deity. Secondly, she has taken away many lives of powerful people whose souls were patched and needed to sustain her existence." Gu Shijiu murmured, "Her existence is a mixture of so many lives. No wonder she knows so much. I thought that her knowledge came from the conversations she had with the people who died here. Little did I know it was from their souls that she had consumed." "Are you having doubts about yourself?" Difui gently caressed her hair as he asked. Gu Shijiu did not doubt her own capability. She always knew that she was not perfect, to begin with anyway. Then, Difui planted a soft kiss on her forehead. "You don't need to doubt yourself. I love the way you are, being perfectly imperfect." Feeling a little lost, Gu Shijie was not sure if it was meant to be a compliment or an insult. She gave him a light kick and added, "You are not perfect either. Your cooking is terrible. We are two of a kind, so we should stop belittling each other." He then kissed the tip of her nose and continued, "Are you still in great pain?" Gu Shijie said nothing at first. She paused for a moment, and suddenly realized why he had been blabbering on and on. He was trying to divert her attention away from her physical pain. Indeed, she was feeling much better now. The pain was bearable. Di Fui then studied her complexion and said, "The pain should have subsided. Some colors have finally returned to your cheeks," he complimented, before giving her a soft kiss on the lips. The man had kissed her 3 times in quick succession. For that, Gu Shijie was feeling blessed. Nonetheless, she pushed him away out of the blue. Di Fui was rather perplexed by her action as she was leaning in for another kiss when she suddenly pushed him away. "What is the matter?" Gu Shijie did not answer his bewilderment. Instead, she retrieved a mirror. One quick look at her reflection almost prompted her to toss it away. She looked at Di Fui in disbelief. "I look horribly repulsive, and yet you still managed to kiss me." Her wounds were beginning to form scars, but they had not entirely recovered. Her skin was covered entirely in patches of scabs and scars, and half of her hair was gone, making her look terribly unkempt. On top of that, there were 3 big scars on her face, which made her feel rather embarrassed. He still kissed her, regardless. Di Fui stroked her face gently. "Don't feel bad. This look of yours is quite unique. Wait for me to retrieve your body. You will be able to have a good, long rest then. I am sure that all of your wounds will recover just fine." Gu Shijie felt a sudden sense of hopelessness at the task he had. It would not be easy for him to retrieve her body. The demon was way too powerful. They would not be able to defeat her if they worked together. To make matters worse, both of them were still trapped. She looked at Di Fui and was reminded of a question that was left unanswered. This place is hard to get out of, so it must be difficult to get in as well. How did you manage to come here? By the way, if your soul is here, where is your body? Di Fui grasped her hand before he answered. This place is the same as the desert, which permits only entry. I did not face any difficulty coming in. As for my body, it is safe on the outside of the desert. Nothing is going to happen to it. Chapter 30:27. The man behind it all. Gu Shijie grabbed his hand tightly as another realization struck. Your soul is here as a whole. You did not even leave one small fragment behind to guard your body. She felt an abrupt surge of anxiety in her body. Deities were free to leave their bodies behind and travel using their souls. However, a small fragment of their soul must be left behind to ensure the survival of their physical bodies, or they would be as good as dead. Any delays would cause the body to disintegrate while all systems fail and die away. Although Di Fui was a powerful man, his body was still a physical matter that would decay when without a soul to sustain its survival. All he had was a day to return to his body. Unfortunately, the heat would certainly accelerate the rate of decay. Panicked, Gu Shijie expressed her utter disapproval at his actions. You have always been a careful man. Why did you make such blunder this time? She paused to take a deep breath before continuing. We have to get out as soon as we can. She knocked on the wizardry barrier and said, You should start working on a way out. I will look for other clues. However, Di Fui stopped her. You are still injured. Stay and rest. I will do the work, he instructed. Without further ado, he dived into the dark water and seemed to exit the wizardry barrier. Certainly, Gu Shijie could not stay calm about the fact that he was diving deeper into the dark water. It was also when she saw another layer of wizardry barrier around him that she could ease her mind. About 2 hours later, Di Fui finally returned. Gu Shijie examined his body to make sure he was unharmed. His skin was a little reddened, but he generally looked fine. She was relieved. Did you manage to find anything? The paleness of Di Fui's face indicated something was wrong. He reached out to Gu Shijie and pulled her into a tight embrace. Shijie, I am sorry, he said with guilt. I am afraid that we cannot make it out. The dark water cell is built with a foundation of countless resentful spirits. Unless we can purify their grudge all at once, we will never make it out. Gu Shijie was speechless. When I first arrived, the desert was already swallowing the cities nearby. Many lives were taken away, all filled with resentment. I believe the calamity is still ongoing. This means that the strength of this prison will only grow stronger over time. It will be very difficult to purify. Difui closed his eyes and hugged her tightly. Shijio, I am so sorry to let you down. Gu Shijio remained quiet. She was not ready to give up and scanned her mind for any possible solutions. An abrupt thought reminded her of a series of spells that could be useful. In searching for a solution, she managed to find a way to create a strong wizardry barrier, but even then it would only prolong their survival a little longer, so she did not bother to create it. They leaned against each other within the wizardry barrier that Difui first created. The barrier was already losing its rigidity and might collapse at any moment. In the very end, Gu Shijio finally gave up. She buried herself in Difui's arms as she watched the black water grow deeper and darker. Fui, I am sorry for bringing you into this trouble. Who do you think is the person behind it all? It will be my regret if I do not find out. Fan Qianshi, Difui calmly said. How do you know? Firstly, only Fan Qianshi knows the soul-kneading spell. Secondly, building the dark water prison using resentful spirits is a special skill that not many people know about. From my research, Fan Qianshi used to have a close link to one of the people who knew this technique many years ago. He must have taught Fan Qianshi the method, which he then passed on to the demon. Thirdly, and most importantly, Fan Qianshi wants me dead for good, or at least to trap me for life. Now his goal is achieved. Aha! It seems you are the real Difui. What a smart man. You are smart enough to have guessed it all, but it is too late. A sudden voice emerged. Fan Qianshi then made a graceful appearance on the outside of the water prison. Chapter 30-28. Do you confess to everything that I have just said? He was covered in a loose black robe, and seemed to be carrying an aura of doom and gloom. Silver embroideries were delicately sewn on the fabric that displayed scenic landscapes. His robe danced in the air as he gracefully made his landing. His hair was tied and fastened by a jade hairpin. In contrast to his pale face and white hairpin, his entire body was covered entirely in black. The man was a masterpiece in his own right, with extraordinarily refined elegance. His facial features gave him the appearance of a fine young gentleman, but his aura, as an overpowering ruler, was not to be underestimated. It was the first time Gu Shijio saw his true face, but he somehow reminded her of someone she had seen before. She paused to think and realized it was indeed him. She saw him from her dreams. In her dreams, she saw Difui playing chess against Fan Qianshi. He was wearing the same black outfit as the first time she saw him. He must be here to show off his supreme identity as a creation deity. He looked clean and neat, with his hair perfectly done. No detail on his outfit was overlooked, and he certainly looked different from when Gu Shijio saw him a few days ago. Perhaps he was only pretending to look messy back then. His acting skills were undoubtedly convincing. It was a shame that he did not make acting his full-time career. Fan Qianshi could obviously see them through the prison. His eyes lingered on them both, first on Gu Shijio, and then to Difui. Mr. Fui, what else do you have to say? Do you confess to everything that I have just said? Difui asked after a momentary pause. Fan Qianshi swiftly agreed. Of course. That's a surprise. I thought you were going to quibble for a bit and act all innocent. That is totally unnecessary, Fan Qianshi proudly said. He had been planning this for thousands of years, and had been through slanders and humiliations to carry out his mission. It was a success at last. Difui was trapped with no way out. He needed to savor the moment by making the most fun out of the situation. The man that he had been waiting to defeat and his moment of victory were finally in his grasp. He wanted for Difui to be sad and depressed as a compensation for the many tough years that he had to wield his power from the shadows. At this point, there was no need for him to deny any further accusations. Instead, he was ready to tell them more. How many years have you been planning this? Difui asked. 56, 328 years. To be more accurate, I will even add 5 months and 8 days. Fan Qianshi made it very clear. What a long time. Di Fui was quite surprised by his determination. You have only come to know the demon for about 30,000 years, which means that you had spent the first 20,000 years looking for the perfect subject. Am I right? Fan Qianshi answered, that is right. A perfect subject is hard to come by. It takes a favorable climate and geographical position to brew a perfect plan. After a pause he then added, however, you made a mistake just now. I did not learn the method of building the dark water prison from Luo Jiuchen. Instead he got it from me. He was the one who spread the news. Di Fui continued, were you the one who planned for Luo Jiuchen's bizarre disaster that endangered the 6 worlds? I was not even alive back then. What did you aim to achieve? To test the effectiveness of a newly found spell. Gu Shijiu was dumbfounded. She looked at Fan Qianshi in utter disbelief, and started to question if he was indeed a demon himself. He put innocent people at risk by plunging them into an abyss of misery and death. All because he needed to test a spell. Fan Qianshi caught her looking at him with eyes that were filled with disgust and utter disapproval. He then looked away. Chapter 30-29. You only planned to bring me down. He opened up his foldable fan in a casual manner before continuing. Don't you look at me like that. They were great troubles to me back then. I needed to teach them a lesson. When did you find Zygius demon? 35,000 years ago, Fan Qianshi answered honestly. I came across this place by accident and saw the little desert in a small town. It seemed like uncharted territory that needed to be explored. I decided to go in there out of curiosity, and found the demon that was hidden within. She did not even have a body or a face of her own. Also, she was disgusted by the sight of me. He threw Gu Shijiu a quick glance and added, she reminded me of you, looking innocent and harmless, but harmful in the end. Also, she did not remember me at all. Gu Shijiu disapproved of his statement. I have only one regret. With her eyes fixed on Fan Qianshi, she then firmly said, I must have been blind to have you as my disciple. Fan Qianshi's face turned pale at her disappointment. It is my destiny to become a creation deity. Having me as your disciple in only the course of our crossed destinies. He smirked in triumph. It is my greatest mistake to have feelings for you. I remained loyal to you and asked only for you to pay more attention to me. But what did you do to me instead? You planned to bring me down. Furthermore, you forgot your mission completely, all in the name of love. You acted against destiny's calling and trained Di Fui as your successor instead, so he could go on and become the ultimate ruler of all 6 worlds. You put me away in isolation, so I would not be in his way. It was my mistake to think that you actually cared for me, even though you did not love me. I thought you had everything planned for me until the dawn of your immortalization. I was thrilled for days when you got me a candle dragon's egg. Wholeheartedly, I nurtured the egg to hatch it so that you could finally be proud of my achievement. I worked tirelessly for your approval. But what did you do to me instead? Gu Shijiu went into a rage. What did I do? The egg was only an excuse to keep me out of your way. You were on the brink of your immortalization, so you needed time to bring Di Fui up as the next creation deity. You brought him into the forbidden land of God, and passed everything down to him, so that I would end up becoming the laughingstock of the 6 worlds. However, it was a shame that destiny disposed of the plan that you proposed. I could sense that you were dying, so I made my way to you and entered the forbidden land of God by chance. All of a sudden, I awoke to become the next creation deity, with powers given by God. I was blind to have fallen for you, such a simple-minded and heartless woman. Gu Shijiu said nothing more. Chapter 30-30. Playing off one against the other as destiny unfolded, Fan Qianshi eventually became the creation deity. Di Fui, who had been quiet for a while, commented, you were not blinded by love, but instead by your obsession. You wanted things that were not meant to be yours. Anyway, those are long in our past, so there is no point to even talk about it now. It seems like the demon is only a tool of yours. How did you know that Shijiu would end up here? If it was not for Dihao, we would not have stepped foot into this desert at all. Fan Qianshi explained in an arrogant manner. Dihao was only an accident. The demon had reached full maturity, so it was only a matter of time before she became fully destructive. Even without Dihao, you would still come to evaluate the situation. Once you entered the desert, you would have no choice but to play along according to my rules. Di Fui laughed out loud at his ludicrousness. Fan Qianshi, you got us. We acknowledge that. What about the demon? What are you going to do with her? That is none of your concern. Fan Qianshi dismissed him swiftly. Meanwhile, Di Fui continued with heavy irony. You are afraid to tell us, aren't you? Your goal has been achieved, so she will be eliminated as well. In order for you to truly become the ruler of all 6 worlds, you need to build a lasting reputation by gaining public respect. The expansion of the demonic desert will go on indefinitely and become the biggest catastrophe that endangers the existing world. If you get rid of it, people will submit themselves to you for all eternity. Gu Shijiu finally got a grasp of it. To kill 2 birds with 1 stone. What an impressive strategy. Shut up. I will not do anything harmful to her. Fan Qianshi responded with anger. With a smirk, Di Fui continued to challenge him. Is that so? Fan Qianshi, others may know nothing about the soul-kneading spell, but you cannot fool me. It is dark magic that will cause her to have a hidden but fatal defect, which I believe is a fact that you concealed from her. You, as the originator of the spell, know about its fatality better than anyone else. If you want to kill her, all you have to do it is to attack the defective spot of hers. Also, this dark water prison is a cruel practice that absorbs countless of resentful spirits, which is something against the laws of nature. With the use of such a spell, her kung fu will be largely increased, but at the risk of her own safety. At some point, she will not be able to hold against the overbearing grudges and collapse. She will die in a major explosion, even without any intervention from you. Luo Jiuqin used the same spell on a celestial being and turned her into a massive killing machine. She ended up being swallowed by the resentful spirits, without a trace of her soul left behind. Gu Shijiu looked surprised. Are you talking about the feud between the Divine Lord and the Great Devil? I have heard about it. Luo Jiuqin wanted to replace the Divine Lord, but he could not do the killing on his own. Secretly, he used the Divine Lord's godsister as his subject and turned her into a weapon that threatened all beings. She thought that she was invincible, but little did she know that she was merely a pawn in another man's grand scheme of wickedness. With a frown, Fan Qianshi wanted to defend himself, but Di Fui added on. Fan Qianshi, are you trying to deny it? Are you going to say that the incident was made up? Are you going to deny the fact that you were the one who taught Luo Jiuqin dark magic? If you were bold enough to do it back then, you should man up and accept the responsibility right now. Fan Qianshi replied scornfully. So what if it is true? To answer your question, yes, I was the one who taught him dark magic. Chapter 30-31. Playing off one against the other, too. Before he was done explaining, a sudden rush of cold wind interrupted him. Fan Qianshi, I did not know about that part of your plan. An icy voice could be heard echoing in the air. A lady in a green dress arrived at the scene. The demon made her way here in time to hear the story. She was still carrying Gu Zijia's body, but her aura was completely different. Nonetheless, her face remained the same. A layer of dark energy surrounded her body, while the resentful spirits terrifyingly continued their ghastly howls. Surprisingly, she seemed aware of their conversation, as observed from her boiling rage. She looked at Fan Qianshi fixedly with a sense of hostility. Bastard! How dare you challenge me? Fan Qianshi was dumbstruck. Things had taken a very sharp turn for him. He already set up a secured perimeter with a layer of wizardry barrier that was soundproof. Their conversations were only meant for their ears. How did the demon find out about it? Master, don't you listen to them. They are trying to drive a wedge between us. Fan Qianshi quickly explained. The demon refused to listen to him any further. With a smug, she rushed toward him at an astonishing speed. Are you trying to deny it? I have heard everything. Fan Qianshi, I would love to see how you plan to rebel against your own master. Fan Qianshi did not know what to tell her to ease the situation. He wanted to give her an excuse or some sort of reason, but the demon refused to listen to him any longer. She overheard their conversation from the corner, and thought that it was enough information for her to confirm Fan Qianshi's revolting behavior. She offered no second chance to him. A deadly fight was inevitable. At this point, the demon's spiritual power was at its highest. As soon as she struck her first move, the sky was immediately obscured with layers of dark clouds. In a mist of black fog, the sand particles had turned into sharp weapons. As if braving a raging storm, it would surely be a very tough fight for Fan Qianshi. Unfortunately for him, there was no time for him to explain any further. He had to focus and fight for his life. Both of them started engaging each other with powerful moves that made the sky feel as though it was falling apart. The raging wind that entered the fray made the surrounding air filled with sand and dust. The boulders and rocks in the desert seemed to be shattered as a result of their battle. The only boulder that remained was the one that housed Di Fui and Gu Shijiu. It stood against the raging storm and remained unaffected. Gu Shijiu watched as the fight went on for a while and sighed. She started directing a directed audio message to Di Fui. Their moves are more or less the same. The demon obviously possesses her memory from her previous life. They really do seem like a master and a disciple. A master and a disciple in their previous lives, Di Fui corrected. Do you think I mistreated him before? Would I bring him down all because of you? Di Fui rubbed her hair gently and said, Who knows what happened previously? It is our past anyway, he then sighed before continuing. I have no memory about that, too. However, I am pleased that you and I were already madly in love. Even in our previous lives. The fight was still ongoing in a state of chaos and darkness, and victory still hung in the balance. Nevertheless, all Gu Shijiu could think about now was Di Hao. I wonder how Hao is doing at the moment? Has he fallen into the cruel hands of Fan Qianshi? Di Fui reassured. Worry not. Hao is still well and alive. Really? How do you know? Gu Shijiu was surprised by his tone of confidence. A telepathic connection between a father and a son. He hid the truth from her that Di Hao was the master of the heavenly law. If anything happened to him, there would be odd happenings everywhere to indicate his death. Also, Di Fui would be able to sense it. In this case, no news means good news. The boy was still alive and well. The only question was where he was hiding. Gu Shijiu knew that Di Fui would not joke with her about the safety of their child, so she finally felt slightly relieved. Chapter 30-32. Playing off one against the other 3. She took a look at the demon again, and then to Di Fui. I thought you kept her away somewhere hidden, didn't you? I did not expect that she would come back so early. Also, Fan Qianshi should know that this place is still the demon's territory. And yet he blabbered on without a care. Every bit about the truth was generously spilled. There must be a wizardry barrier that he thought was soundproof. If that is so, how did the demon find out everything? By the way, how did you manage to escape? She threw out a series of questions at him. Di Fui had no intention of lying to her. An array formation was set up about 100 miles from here. When we got there, I made an excuse that I had to treat Haoer's injuries. She felt very safe in her territory, so she stopped by without any concern. Then I made up another excuse to run a perimeter check. That was when I left. I made a replacement puppet to go back to her as a reassurance. She acted like she was severely injured, so she sat in silent cultivation for recovery. She did not even check on the replacement that I made, so I seized the window of opportunity and found my way back to you. However, the replacement could only last for 2 hours. When the time was up, she would surely notice something was off and would go looking for me. The array formation was made to confine her for only 2 hours. Also, I left a mirror behind on purpose. The parallel mirror? Yes, from the mirror, she would be able to see and hear everything that was happening here. Gu Shijiu was thoroughly impressed by his quick wits. What a thoughtful plan. Did you figure out that the demon and Fan Qianshi were actually on the same team a long time ago? Di Fui nodded. I did not know about the demon's identity at first, but I somehow found that the swallowing desert looked familiar. It seemed like something only Fan Qianxue would do, so I tried to lure him into talking. It went well as he spilled everything. Gu Shijie was awestruck. You made it sound so real, but it turned out to be a trap. I had made my deductions from the available facts. My logical conclusions hardly go wrong. Did you also deduce that the demon would end up in shambles? More or less. So full of tricks. With a thumbs up, Gu Shijie was very impressed by her husband's daring maneuvers. Di Fui held her thumb in his hand and said, I think you can say that I am both intelligent and practical. Also, baby, I have to say that you are brilliant. I did not tell you anything in advance, and yet you were able to chime in. Gu Shijie was quite embarrassed by his compliment. Well, I would not be compatible with the great celestial masters if I were any less intelligent, right? They continued to chat on for a while before Gu Shijie turned her attention back to the fight. Fan Qianxue and the demon continued battling against one another in the sky. Gu Shijie looked up but could only see the rolling dark clouds. Lightning flashed, and thunder rumbled every once in a while. Occasionally, their figures could be seen against the light. Gu Shijie softly said, They are so busy fighting. Shouldn't they be worried about our escape? Di Fui examined the dark water that surrounded them and replied, This dark water prison is truly the best way to secure anyone from running away. They are not worried about us at all. Don't you have a way out? Gu Shijie was really curious. With a smile, Di Fui answered confidently, Don't worry. There is nothing in the world that can trap me. Gu Shijie heaved a sigh of relief. He sounded like he already had a plan. Let's take the chance to run away now when they are not paying attention. She refused to waste any time. Chapter 30-33. Playing off one against the other 4. It is not the right time yet. Let's wait. Di Fui suggested while observing the clouds of dust around them. Gu Shijie was perplexed. Di Fui sighed before explaining. One of them is the creation deity, the other is the demon of the former creation deity. The fight is causing the place to undergo earth-shattering changes, which probably involves the entire desert. Nowhere else is safe. Look at the clouds of dust. Their fight will affect anyone with 1,000 miles. Without the power of a great deity, one will perish as soon as he or she enters the radius of their battlefield. Clearly he had a point. Gu Shijie agreed with him. We are not capable of defeating them. You are injured, and I am exhausted. Running away right now will make us both easy targets. This does not sound like a good plan at all. Shall we wait until both of them have worn each other out? Smart, Di Fui complimented, while gently caressing her hand. Gu Shijie threw him a quick look. She was actually quite impressed by her husband's modest estimate of his power. He frankly admitted his weakness when he was not at his best. Sometimes he would go the extra mile to achieve his goal, even though the path he takes may be seen as somewhat wayward. Perhaps his kung fu was not what made him invincible, but his insightful ideas. Baby, why are you looking at me with judgment in your eyes? You are mistaken. I am idolizing you with a sense of admiration. They continued to chat for a while as Gu Shijie was more relieved. Knowing that her son was safe and that they would eventually be safe too, made their chat more relaxed. With a sigh of relief she said, They would not stand a chance if you recall your memory and kung fu as the master of the heavenly law. Also, we would not have to waste our time here waiting for our chance of escape. Di Fui started thinking about what she said, but soon broke into a smile. Don't worry. I will teach them a lesson even without the power of a deity. A well-thought plan is better than a moment of bravery. We should anticipate and outsmart the competition. In time, we shall defeat them all. Gu Shijie stayed quiet, but her respect had been won over by Di Fui. You are always full of wisdom. Meanwhile, the terrifying sight of the dark water sent chills down her spine. The level of water in the prison continued to rise. The couple then looked around, only to realize that the surface of the water was already about the size of Taihu Lake. The vast blackness was a rather grim sight. Just at that time, the rise in the water level came to a halt. Gu Shijie told Di Fui about her keen observation of the water level. Seems like they made it, Difui commented. Ah, we have a lot of people here to support us. I told them about an array formation that they needed to set up here. With enough manpower and energy, the array formation can be used to suppress the expansion of the desert. It looks like they made it here in time. A large crowd was gathered on the outskirts of the desert. Amongst them were Kuan Shui, the 4 messengers, the celestial emperor, the devil king, and all 8 ancient mythical beasts. Almost every important person from all 6 worlds was present to support. They were equally aghast at the extreme oddity of the desert. However, there was no time for fear. As soon as they arrived, they followed Baize's instruction and started learning the key features of the array formation. The formation was a very complex one, but they were able to learn everything fairly quickly. About 2 hours later, the entire array formation was aligned in the sky. Many streaks of light filled the sky, brightening up the entire gloomy desert. The array formation was a crucial weapon in this tactical situation. The results could be seen immediately as the crazy expansion of the desert finally came to a halt. Baize finally heaved a sigh of relief. Unfortunately, the entire territory here was already engulfed by the desert. Millions of lives were lost. Chapter 30-34. The grand finale. From afar, the desert was filled entirely with black dust. The screaming spirits screeched in the wind, and their piercing voices grew louder and more disturbing. These spirits were extremely violent, almost to an unimaginable extent. The crowd outside could feel the forces of evil even from miles apart. None of them had experienced such a violent desert before. The mere sight of the evil spirits made their skin creep, but also made them appreciate Difui's prophetic vision. The desert was like a giant black hole. They needed to stop it from consuming everything in its path, or the entire world would cease to exist. They were glad that Difui had foreseen the consequences in advance, so they had time to prepare the array formation. One thing was for sure, they did not have to stand there in despair just yet. At least 500 people showed up to support. All of them were powerful. Although they were able to expand the array formation to its fullest, it was certainly very challenging to keep it going. The evil aura of the desert was too strong to be held within. It felt like holding back a giant dinosaur with only a rope. Even with their maximum strength and effort, all they could do was to stop the desert from expanding further. Nevertheless, they did not stand a chance to defeat it. In order to permanently remove the roots of the problem and prevent a reoccurrence, they had to start from within. However, the desert was too violent at the moment. They would be shredded into pieces if they moved any closer. Going into the desert seemed impossible right now. Therefore, they continued to support the array formation. As they did so, they also kept observing the ongoing situation. Difui had gone into the desert for many hours by then, but there was still no news from him. Baize started wondering if he and Madame were safe in there. The array formation would only last for 2 days at most. Would it buy them enough time and power to destroy the desert? Baize took a look at the desert where black dust continued to storm, and was quite puzzled. It was said that the array formation was able to put the expansion of the disastrous desert to a halt, and hopefully make it shrink. The apparent situation turned out to be completely different from their expectations. Baize then took a quick look at the familiar faces who took part in the array formation, which included Long Sai. Recently, Long Sai had an exceptional encounter with a great deity who ended up becoming his master. Her name was Hua Yan. Although she was not a well-known figure, her power was not to be underestimated. Furthermore, her method of teaching was proven to be effective, as seen from Long Sai's outstanding achievement as a great deity in only a few years. The Emperor Immortal gladly appointed him as the chief advisor as well as his right-hand man. Also, he was entrusted with the power of the military. As the commander-in-chief, he led a delegation of more than 100,000 soldiers. As for his mysterious master, she had been living under Long Sai's roof with a rather secluded life. Baize once investigated her background, but there was nothing suspicious or odd that he could find. She was just a hermit who was phlegmatic and antisocial. She used to live in a celestial mountain from a foreign land, which was where Long Sai met her. He was there to collect some herbs but got involved in an accident. Fortunately, the lady was there to help. The next thing she noticed was Longsai's potential, which prompted her to take him as her disciple. It was said to be an act for him to return her favor of saving his life. It was a rather odd method of repaying one's debt, but Longsai was not particularly bothered by it. Moreover, he refused to owe her any favors, so he agreed to become her disciple. To his surprise, she turned out to be a responsible master. She taught him many hidden spells and also gave away many magical pills and medicine to him. In time, Longsai's kung fu became more and more powerful. Bai Zhe had been following her tracks for many years, but there seemed to be no concern at all. Although Longsai's kung fu was elevated at an astonishing rate, everything about him was still good and pure, with no involvement of dark magic. With that said, Bai Zhe was finally able to let the matter go. At first, Bai Zhe did not plan to notify Longsai and his master, Hua Yan, about this gathering of great powers. After all, Longsai used to be a clone of Fan Qianshi. There might be some sort of telepathic connection that could be misused by Fan Qianshi to anticipate and control Longsai's every move. Chapter 30-35. The Grand Finale 2. It seemed that the Emperor Immortal absolutely trusted Longsai. Bai Zhe thought that Emperor Immortal shared the same concern, so it did not send any formal reminder to him. Nonetheless, Longsai ended up being brought to the gathering as well. Longsai even brought his master, Hua Yan, along. Both of them were assigned to their designated locations. Like everyone else, they channeled all of their power to support the array formation. It was a relieving sight for Bai Zhe to see them working together with everyone. Naturally, it threw Hua Yan a quick glance every once in a while. Her name had a youthful and fresh tone associated with it, which was the complete opposite of her unapproachable character. No one dared to go near to her at all. Her beauty was, without a doubt, captivating. Many men had their hearts submitted to her, but ended up with the same ruthless rejection. Bai Zhe thought that she and Gu Shijie were quite similar in terms of their character, though their appearances were vastly different. Perhaps, it was her personality that brought Longsai close to her. Bai Zhe still had some doubts about them, so it asked the Flying Serpent and Tao Wu to stay close to them. If anything went wrong, they would be able to pacify the situation. Things went wild in the desert. The epic battle between Fan Qianshi and the demon had come to its climax. The sky and the earth had split, and Fan Qianshi started to regret his actions. Di Fui was right, however. Fan Qianshi had indeed planted a weak point in the demon. Unfortunately for her, it was under Fan Qianshi's control. He did not intend to end the demon in a major explosion. Instead, he was trying to decrease her power and strength to the level of an ordinary immortal. As he was still obsessed with Gu Shijie, Fan Qianshi would definitely not give her up so easily. He could now own her body rather easily, but what he truly wanted was her heart. He had a plan mapped out. The demon would be the one who created the trap for Gu Shijie and Di Fui. With Di Fui in his hands, he would decide whether to kill or to imprison the man. Later, everything about the man in Gu Zijie's memory would be wiped away. Granted with a new body, the demon's memory would then be planted into her head, and they would start from a clean slate and fall in love. Hopefully, the two would end up spending eternity together. Nevertheless, Fan Qianshi was also aware that it was almost impossible to control Gu Shijie. Her memory could not be wiped clean as her love for Di Fui was irreversible. Therefore, he wanted to keep the demon as a potential backup. The demon and Gu Shijie were not very similar, but they were somehow related. Also, the demon still had some memories of the former creation deity. When his revenge was complete, he would take control of the demon and disassemble her souls. The resentment and grudge would be removed, leaving the demon in her primitive form. He would then combine the demon with other souls that he had carefully selected, so that she could become a whole new person, but still carry the memory of the former creation deity. He wanted to create a future where they could spend together forever. Regardless of his available options, the death of the demon was not on the list. The plan was to confine Di Fui and Gu Shijie in the desert first, and then leave the desert to evolve into a deadly disaster for the 6 worlds. He would then emerge as a hero who took down the desert, and put an end to its destruction. Fan Qianshi was the one who brought the desert to life, so he was the one who could stop it. He looked forward to becoming a hero who got rid of the disaster, and would then take the chance to establish his power and take over the 6 worlds as the ultimate ruler. Unfortunately, Difui saw through his plot and exposed his tracks. To make matters worse, the demon overheard their entire conversation. Chapter 30-36. The Grand Finale 3. Unfortunately, Difui saw through his plot and exposed his tracks. To make matters worse, the demon overheard their entire conversation. Their battle became unavoidable, even though it was something Fan Qianshi did not plan for. It was a pity that they had to fight, but he was not nervous about it. He had her life in his control, so it was not difficult to threaten her whenever necessary. Nevertheless, it was an ultimate move that he would like to avoid using unless necessary. He wanted to fight her with his powers first to try to tame the demon. However, as soon as the battle started, he finally realized that the demon's kung fu was much more powerful than he had expected. Her power was in no way inferior to his power as a creation deity. In fact, the more she fought, the better she got. He tried to escape many times but was unsuccessful. To his dismay, she pushed him into a flurry of attacks that made him make careless mistakes. At this point, the result of the battle was uncertain. While Fan Qianshi was busy fighting, he never stopped looking at the dark water prison. Difui was sitting there with Gu Shijiu in his arms. She looked dreadfully untidy, but at least she was happy. Casually, she laid her head on his chest so that Difui could stroke her hair. Difui saw Fan Qianshi's eyes lingering on them and returned it with a smile. Obviously, Fan Qianshi found the couple to be utterly annoying. They were busy showing affection to one another. Even in times of great danger, Fan Qianshi could not help but smirk at their lack of awareness. He could tell what Difui thought since he was renowned for his ability to solve any sort of wizardry barrier. The man must be thinking that the dark water prison was just another challenge. Perhaps, they were actually waiting for the right time to escape when the fight finally came to a bitter end. However, he would not let Difui have what he wanted. The dark water in the prison was, indeed, extracted from the resentful spirits in the desert. In order to permanently confine Difui, the desert would have to swallow 6 million fresh souls that would keep the prison secure. He made a detailed calculation already and determined that once the desert had swallowed 36 major cities in the continent, the death toll would definitely rise to the desired amount. Also, he paid extra attention to the surface area of the dark water whenever he managed to steal a glance. When the dark water reached the size of 2 Taihu lakes combined, it would mean that 6 million lives had been consumed in total, and the wizardry barrier would be heavily fortified by then. The dark water prison was about the size of 1.5 Taihu lakes at the moment. It would not be long before it reached its maturity. 6 more hours were all it needed. Laugh on Difui. Both of you will be terribly sorry, he thought. Fan Qianshi could not help but curse at them for their foolishness, but when he saw Gu Zijius burns, his heart ached a little for her. He tried to forget the pain that she had to suffer and put the blame on her. The man had originally intended to get Gu Shijiu out of the prison before the barrier was reinforced, so that she would not have to suffer the corrosion from the dark water again. However, the way she chimed in with Difui in their brutal confrontation had driven a wide wedge between Fan Qianshi and the demon. He had to employ all of his energy in the fight, so there was no way he could get her out of the water. 2 hours went by, and Fan Qianshi took another quick look at the level of the dark water and was surprised. The surface area did not seem to grow at all. It was still as big as when he last saw it. How was that possible? Who else could have possibly stopped the deadly desert from expanding? While he was busy contemplating, a brief moment of absent-mindedness almost cost him his life. Fortunately for him, he was able to escape his fate of being beheaded. However, he was not able to escape the pain. The blade slashed his shoulder open and cut away part of his flesh. He winced, aghast at the brutality of the injury. Chapter 30-37. The Grand Finale 4. Fan Qianshi took a few quick steps back to keep his balance, but the wound was unusually painful and numbing. He felt as if countless ants were chewing off his flesh all at the same time. It was terribly uncomfortable, and he caught some blood oozing out from the wound in one quick glance. To add to his misery, the blood was golden. He had been poisoned. It was an unfamiliar type of poison, unknown even to an expert like him. Naturally, he looked at the demon in bewilderment. The demon did not follow on from her successful attack with a series of blows. Instead, she stood watching him with a satisfied smile. Fan Qianshi, you once promised to be my disciple forever, but I have changed my mind about that. You are becoming my servant instead. The next thing that Fan Qianshi could feel was something crawling from the wound into his flesh. Through the bloodstream, he could feel the sensation slowly taking over his consciousness as his head started to spin. He never thought he would be poisoned. Fan Qianshi conducted frequent experiments with all sorts of poisons. In time, his body had developed a natural defense against most poisons, which led him to think that he was already immune. Luckily for him, he always had the antidote with him, which he downed hastily. The demon looked at him attentively as she commented, "It is useless. The poison has no cure. Be prepared to serve my boy." "What kind of poison is this?" Fan Qianshi started panting. "It is known as the Eternal Love Potion," the demon answered ironically. This poison was supplied by a gentleman. His kung fu was not spectacular, but his poison-making skill was extraordinary. I almost fell for his poisonous trap during our fight. Eventually, I swallowed his soul as a whole, so his skill became mine. Blood from the heart of 1,000 couples was extracted and purified into this fine bottle of elixir. This is the only bottle that I have made available for a single use. Glimpses of hope shone in his eyes as he said, "You made this elixir for us to be together eternally? Actually, that is totally unnecessary. I want to be with you, always and forever." The demon laughed out loud at the absurdity of his reply. "That is a complete misunderstanding. I was not asking for your love, but your eternal obedience. When the poison gets to your brain, you will completely submit to my authority." She only wanted him to become a puppet. Fan Qianshi sighed. "You should not have done that. I have always been truthful to you about my feelings. I will do anything for you, even without the poison." "What a lie. This whole scheme of yours will be used against me when everything comes to an end. I am only a tool in your elaborate plan. You have admitted it all, so stop denying." "Master, I only said so to annoy them both. It was not the truth. Look at us. Look at my injury. We have been fighting for so long. But I have not done anything to you thus far, have I? If I knew about your weak point, I would have used it already. Master, you are a very smart woman. You should know that I have been wronged." He then reached out his hand to the demon and continued, "Give me the antidote, please." The demon pinched her lips into a thin line in display of her regret. "This is not the antidote." The gentleman tended to go to the extreme, so all of his poisons had no cure. Fan Qianshi was utterly shocked by her remark. His eyes became dim and he swayed a little as a result of the poison, but did not seem to cast any spells. However, glimpses of colorful rays faintly flashed with every movement he made. The series of movements seemed unintentional, but he was actually activating the fatality point that was buried in the soul of the demon. He had tested the method on other subjects many times. It never failed. Chapter 30-38. The Grand Finale 5. He wanted to wait until the dark water prison was successfully reinforced before he cast the spell on the demon, but his safety was at risk, so he could not delay it any longer. At that moment, he could feel the sensation moving aggressively in his bloodstream towards his head. If he had not set up a barrier in time to separate and protect his brain, the poison would have taken away everything. As expected, the poison was very aggressive, so the barrier that he had set up could barely hold on any longer. He needed to focus on meditating in order to keep the poison out of his system, or he would become a puppet forever. Needless to say, it needed to be done quickly. A few moments later, the demon suddenly felt an abnormality in her body that made her struggle to keep her balance. She took a few unsteady steps forward and seemed to be about to fall. With one hand on her chest, She looked at Fan Qianshi with bloodshot eyes. "Bastard! What have you done to me?" she exclaimed furiously. She could feel her chest being struck heavily with a blunt instrument in a deadly attempt to tear her apart. In fact, the pieces of her soul were struggling to stay in one piece. She noticed that it was Fan Qianshi who was behind what was happening. "You must be playing some tricks with me. You just said that you knew nothing about my fatality point." Panicked, Fan Qianshi could not believe what had just happened. The spell had failed. He thought that the spell was able to separate the demon's soul from her body. Without a physical body, the demon's kung fu would be greatly reduced, thus reducing her will to fight. Like a tiger without its teeth, he could easily control her then. To his disappointment, the spell only caused her to sway a little, but her soul was still strongly attached to her body. To make matters worse, his plan was completely exposed. The demon flew into a rage, as evidenced by the fury in her eyes. She crossed her hands before taking a huge leap towards Fan Qianshi in an attempt to take revenge. "Bastard, you truly are plotting against me." There was no time for Fan Qianshi to feel sorry for himself, as another round of the battle was inevitable. He continued to use the spell a few times in order to attack her weakness, but all he could do was to make her lose her balance. There was no actual use at all. Instead of working in his favor, he managed to trigger her into a killing mania. She was ruthless, and there was no way she was backing down. She made a loud screech to summon the winds of winter. In an instant, the flat land of sand was turned entirely into a bizarre land of ice, while the surrounding temperature in the desert dropped sharply as if the world was undergoing another glacial episode. Snowflakes sluiced down the land like sharp knives and were all aimed at Fan Qianshi. Gu Shijiu and Di Fui were patiently sitting inside the prison. According to Di Fui's plan, they were supposed to wait until Fan Qianshi attacked the demon by triggering her weak point. When their enemies were both worn out, it would be their time to fight. However, they did not see the failure of the spell coming. It did not seem to have any noticeable effect on weakening the demon. Instead, it released her full potential. The rising level and temperature of the dark water already came to a stop before everything went haywire, so they could actually have some time to rest. However, as soon as the demon went all guns blazing, the dark water started boiling again. On the outside, they could see snow everywhere, but within their confinement, the dark water continued to boil, thus filling their limited space with hot vapor. Also, many scary skeletons that were flashing with red light seemed to appear in the prison. With their mouth wide open, they had their fangs buried on the surface of the wizardry barrier in an eager attempt to break through it and chew on the living beings that were sitting helplessly in the bubble. As the dark water continued to boil, more and more skeletons came alive. About an hour later, the entire bubble of their wizardry barrier was surrounded by countless skeletons from every direction, and was a rather spooky sight. Chapter 30-39. The Grand Finale 6. As naturally, Di Fui's wizardry barrier began to lose its stability. Frankly, he already felt that the wizardry barrier was losing its rigidity even before the demon became furious with Fan Qianshi. Suddenly he announced, "No, things are not looking good. We have to get out now." Without wasting any time, he started to work on their escape plan. Di Fui was well prepared, but he would still need at least an hour for them to find a way out. Luckily, he had a helpful assistant. Gu Shijiu was informed of the solution beforehand, so she could play a part in their escape. Soon, they became fully occupied with their tasks. While they were still working on the barrier, Di Fui suddenly said, "Shijiu, we have to be quick. The water is rising again." The rising level of the dark water indicated that the desert was, once again, expanding. More lives were inevitably lost in this tragic disaster. They really had to be quick. On the outside of the desert, there had been an unforeseen calamity. The desert was contained for a while earlier, so the expansion stopped. Nevertheless, when they heard a loud screech from within the core of the desert, it went into an uncontrollable and frantic mode. Like a confined beast that had just broken free, it became 10 times more powerful than it was before. Ruthlessly, it started attacking people in different corners of the array formation. They tried their very best to keep it contained, but ended up being swept away by the aggressive storm. Many could not withstand the impact and got injured. Nonetheless, they continued to hold their positions, though it was difficult. This only lasted for an hour before they eventually gave up. A deafening crash occurred in the air, amidst loud screaming from the people. It did not take long for the array formation to become completely broken apart, as all of them were sent across the air, due to the sheer force from inside the desert. Apparently, the war from the inside went on with all its stresses and strains. Even Baize struggled to keep its balance. From what it could observe, the desert was expanding at an alarming rate again. Hastily, it gathered the people around to rejoin forces. They needed to reset the array formation as soon as possible. However, not everyone was present. At least a dozen of them were missing, including Long Sai and his master, Hua Yan. The Muscle and Lu Wu were only here to be spectators at first, but they were also nowhere to be seen after the great impact. The desert continued to extend as far as it could possibly reach. And very soon, another city was unfortunately swallowed. People screamed for life while being helplessly engulfed by the unrelenting sandstorm. A drop-dead silence then ensued, indicating no survivors. Baize could no longer stay calm. The whole situation was clearly out of control. At that rate, it would only take a day for the desert to engulf the entire continent, taking away tens of millions of innocent lives. It would be as good as the end of the world. Furthermore, the disappearance of Gu Shijie and Di Fui was also very alarming. They still had not emerged from the desert, and things appeared to be getting worse. Within the desert, the demon already went crazy. Her hair danced in the gusts of winter wind. Also, her nails suddenly grew to about a foot long. When her hands moved, streaks of colorful light could be seen glowing from her fingertips, thus forming a very strong visual contrast against the black, dusty background. Evidently, she had unleashed her tremendous rage. Aghast with terror, Fan Qianshi took a few steps back, knowing that there was no way he could fight back. It was the end. She was no longer under his control. Panicked, Fan Qianshi could no longer keep his composure. He understood the consequences very well. Now that he could no longer keep her under control, he would eventually become her puppet. All 6 worlds would perish as a result of her madness, and would eventually cease to exist. It was not what he wanted. The fight had been going on for so long, which was exhausting for him. He felt so weak and numb that he could no longer feel his limbs. Also, he did not get to extract the poison out of his body in time, so the barrier that protected his brain from being poisoned slowly lost its stability. In the meantime, the demon continued to fight with great strength. Instead of getting tired, her power actually kept increasing. When they first started their battle, his kung fu was slightly more powerful than hers. But as the battle progressed, the situation had taken a complete turn. His defeat was only a matter of time away. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.